Well, hello. Fancy meeting you here. It's another day, another stream. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name is Aubri Devashrayee. So, today I'm going to be doing a little bit of follow up from yesterday. I mentioned, and some of you may know, that there was the State of the Union address yesterday. There were people protesting it, boycotting it, and I have seen the highlights of the boycott version, which they had some excellent speakers. Uh, it was diverse representation there, which I was surprised by, but also glad about. They actually had queer people of color talking about human rights issues and migrants' rights, disability rights, and this is not something that is often discussed on the national stage. So I was grateful for that. Um, there were so many lies, obviously. I mean, anyone could guess. Just because this is the pattern of behavior from the fascist king. So, I want to highlight some Democracy Now! Videos where they're actually addressing some of this and correcting the record. Um, so I want to follow up on this. I did not watch the State of the Union live, the Trump one. I've just seen clips of people commenting on it because I don't want to give it the views, and I don't think any of us should. I also want to recap what is happening in the Utah legislative session. There is not a whole lot of content coming out about this, and this, first of all, just puts on display the sad media ecosystem in Utah, where I'm located. Joy. And also that there isn't as much of an appetite for that here. There is a lot of homogenized population. There's a homogenous population here with a lot of homogenous political viewpoints because we don't have a separation of church and state. There is a reason why on the national stage there are many policies that are being lifted from what's happening in Utah, what has happened in Utah historically. So I want to go over some updates there. This video that I'm wanting to watch was from the week of February 6th. So there are updates from this point, clearly, that I will also go over. And then just to continue with Decolonizing Wuthering Heights, the book that I'm reading at the end of every stream, I want to talk about the Indigenous history of York, the place where it is set. And I think this will be really helpful in analyzing a lot of the background of the text and understanding what kind of traditions it is built off of. So we'll do that. Oh, and then it's banned book club. We're reading The Giver by Lois Lowry, chapters 6, 7, and 8. And these are some exciting chapters where we get a lot more momentum into the story. So I'm excited to talk about that with you all. And to finish off, I'll read. Sound like a plan? Oh, some updates. So I included a Patreon link in the Twitch profile for this stream. So if you are interested, I am uploading VODs there, and they're free, so you can access them. One of the reasons why it's nice to upload things there is that you don't have to be worried about copyright stuff. I just started posting to YouTube the VODs as well, which I realize splitting viewership on these two platforms may not be in my interest, but mostly just going for exposure, I guess. And there are also like tons of copyright things with YouTube. So there may be some VODs that aren't able to be uploaded to YouTube in the future, depending on what I'm going over. I'm thinking specifically of Culture Corner on Fridays, where I highlight a lot of music and art that I'm excited about, and music especially. They are very strict with these copyrights. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe that will just be a Patreon VOD section. I don't know. I'm still figuring things out, but whatever. Speaking of whatever, something else I discovered yesterday is that there is someone, or there are a few people with podcasts called Whatever This Is. And like, not to be annoying, some of them have started after like I've been streaming. And I'm like, yeah, I guess this makes sense. A common phrase that people would be interested in using. So we'll see. We may have to fight it out. I may have to change the name of things. I haven't thought that far. Just going with the flow of things as of now. Anyway, start off the day. I want to watch another Patty Harrison video of her reviewing exotic animals. This is the one of her reviewing a fennec fox, which they are exceedingly cute. So, let's enjoy.
This animal is a gun. Bro, this animal is a gun. Welcome to Patty Reviews. I'm here with Nature Nick. What have you got here with you today?
This is Tinkerbell, and she is a fennec fox from Africa.
Wow, all the way from Africa. When did she get in?
Well, her grandparents are from Africa. She was born in California.
Pro, this fox is compatible with an iPhone 7. You don't even need a dongle. Pro, this does have a headphone jack.
This is the smallest type of fox in the world. Full grown at only about 2 pounds.
2 pounds, you're so skinny. Wow, she is as light as Nick said. What's it like to never have to work for anything in your life? Develop a sense of humor as a defense mechanism? I love you, and at the same time, I wish you were dead. So anyway, Nick, what do fennec foxes eat?
Her favorite food out in the wild are scorpions. That's her favorite thing to eat.
Me too, girl. Con, this animal is smaller than I'll ever be. So Nick, how long do fennec foxes normally live?
Same as a dog, about 10 to 12 years she could live to be.
Cool. Pro, these little babies can't die.
He's trying not to laugh. I love seeing when he's about to break.
Would you say this animal could live without a head?
I don't think so.
Pro, this animal's head is interchangeable with other animals.
Just repeating the same clip. Getting that mileage out of editing.
Out in the wild, you'll find them in Morocco, you'll find them northern Africa, into the Middle East.
So like in the Sex and the City movie?
Yes, yeah, in Abu Dhabi, yeah.
Finally, we're all on the same page. Con, hates jazz. Con, the wings on the side of this thing are fully for decoration. It can't fly. We tried. We football tossed it off the top of the building many times. So when it comes to exotic animals, I give this fox a 3 out of 5. Thanks so much for bringing Tinkerbell with you today, Nick. Tinkerbell, have a safe trip to Abu Dhabi. Fly free. Huh? If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and let us know in the comments what animals I should review next. What do you think? What a rude bitch.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. As we continue to cover President Trump's State of the Union, we're joined now by Alia Rahman, who attended the speech as a guest of Minneapolis Congressmember Ilhan Omar. Last month, federal immigration officers in Minneapolis violently dragged Alia out of her car. She told agents she was disabled, that she had a brain injury, but they ignored her pleas for medical attention. She had been headed to a doctor's appointment when she was dragged out of her car. Video of the incident went viral. Last month, she testified at a hearing held by congressional Democrats in Capitol Hill.
I was carried face down through the street by...
Oh, I've been talking and I didn't realize my mic was muted. Whoops. Anyway, we're moving on to this section of the stream. Starting off really great. Operating at maximum capacity. So, we're getting the background from Amy Goodman. I was like making a joke about Amy Goodman, but not really. Just lauding her praises. But you didn't have to listen to my bad jokes, so it worked out in the end.
Cuffed arms and legs while yelling that I had a brain injury and was disabled. I now cannot lift my arms normally. I was never asked for ID, never told I was under arrest, never read my rights, and never charged with a crime.
That was Alia Rahman testifying on Capitol Hill. Last night, she was removed from the gallery at the State of the Union, then arrested and jailed. She got out at like 4 o'clock this morning. Alia, welcome back to Democracy Now! Tell us what you went through last night, and then what happened to you in Minneapolis.
Thanks for having me back, Amy. Yeah, the reason I am wearing the same outfit I was at the State of the Union and in the media I did with Representative Omar, I was a guest of Representative Ilhan Omar's, is because I got out from a hospital visit and the custody of Capitol Police just before 4 a.m. And I had already been scheduled to talk to you, so I figured I would come and tell folks what happened. I was not just removed and arrested. I was arrested so physically that 2 other attendees upstairs attempted to intervene in officers pulling on my shoulders after I told them I have a torn rotator cuff tendon and multiple cartilage tears in both of my shoulders. That is what happened in the audio you just played. That is why I cannot lift my arms normally. 2 women in the gallery, and thank you to the woman in the white shirt with the red writing who said, I need you to take your hands off of her and just let her walk with her cane. They did not do that, and only when their own sergeant intervened in a back stairwell of that building to say, stop, we need to get her medical care and a wheelchair, did they stop.
I mean, not to interrupt her. Okay, just so the frame is a better thing to pause on. This is what happens a lot to people with disabilities. Just extra brutality, especially people of color who have disabilities, especially women. You know, all of these intersections of marginalization, you are more likely to experience brutality, but especially from law enforcement. And the fact that this was happening again to her is not an accident and horrendous. This is really unconscionable. She already has been through so much, and it was really brave of her to even be there as a guest and show up and to be speaking out. So the fact that they treated her this way is really unconscionable.
While again, I was saying disabled. Amy, would you like to know why I was told that I was removed and arrested? The sergeant of arms told me it was because I was standing up, silently. No buttons, no facial expressions, no gestures, no signs, not one sound. Standing up. There are only 2 things you can do at the State of the Union, and they are sit down and stand up. All kinds of people were standing up all night, me too. I stood up at the moment that I heard this man say some of the most racist things I have heard come out of any leader's mouth about the people of my city, and continue to trash talk my state of Minnesota and glorify DHS, the people who did this to me and who are being allowed to roam free on the streets.
If you could very quickly, I'm so sorry this happened to you, but explain why you have a torn rotator cuff, why you have tendons ripped in both shoulders.
I have a tendon ripped in one shoulder, and then in that same shoulder, another cartilage rip, and in my left shoulder, 2 cartilage tears with what my doctor called ragged pieces of tissue hanging in the joint that may need to be operated on. That happened because in the audio you played, I was talking about when I was pulled out of my car. Most people see the first part of that video. I was put on the ground behind my car, cuffed behind my back, and then carried through the street. Face down, I was lifted up by my wrists and ankles with my hands already cuffed behind my back. And then once I was in the Whipple Center, instead of getting me a walking aid because I'm disabled, they just jerked me around by my shoulders for a while. So that's what I'm dealing with. That's what I came here with. And I really wonder if these folks have noticed yet that every time you try to break my body, you fuel my spirit. I was arrested for standing up. This administration wins 0 prizes for their command of metaphors, my friend. The reason I stood up at that moment was not to disrupt anything. I was silent, arms by my side. I stood up because hearing this level of racism, I wanted to see with my own eyes, unmediated by anyone's lens, who had still come to this building to govern, if there were any grown-ups down there. Who really believes this lie that was used to brutalize our city, my body. And if unchecked, this is the lie that will be used to brutalize communities of color, all sorts of communities, as people in this country, as Black folks, Indigenous folks, as this has happened for centuries based on lies. And you know what? I can't think of ever a time that someone has been very physically arrested or arrested at all or even removed for silently standing up at the State of the Union. That is what you do.
Yeah. The disproportionate treatment of like the extreme aggression of what's happening cannot be separated from what she experienced with ICE, cannot be separated from this fascist violent regime, cannot be separated from the just abject bigotry that this regime perpetuates through their ethnic cleansing and eugenics beliefs, and how she is a woman of color with disabilities, that this is common, what happens to people like her. But also, like, how she's mentioning right here of, like, this is, the treatment itself by law enforcement is not uncommon, but it is unusual in this particular instance of this happening at a State of the Union address, where you would think that, like, law enforcement, since they're on camera in this way, that they would be behaving a little bit better, but no.
Only reason I can think that they thought me standing silently there was a protest is because by this point, my body, unafraid, even if broken, standing and looking at these people in their face, well, that must be a protest to you.
You know, I wonder if there's a charge standing without applauding, because certainly Republicans stood up dozens of times throughout President Trump's State of the Union and applauded. But
yes,
you
Amy,
stood
and
silently.
Actually, the moment that they physically started removing me by my shoulders, all kinds of Republicans were standing up. I know they were Republicans because who was seated next to me? The sheriff of Coffee County, Alabama, and the mayor of one of the mayors from Nevada. They were standing up. None of them were arrested. I was much quieter than them.
Well, Alia Rahman, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Arrested at the State of the Union last night, just got out a few hours before this broadcast came right to the studio. Alia was a guest of Representative Ilhan Omar. Last month, federal immigration agents in Minneapolis violently dragged her out of her car as she told them she was disabled. Video of the incident went viral. We'll also link to our previous conversation with her after that attack. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications.
Just disgusting behavior. She does not. She's already been through so much. Like, just unconscionable, like I said. But, like, what a warrior as well, of being like, hey, I had this interview appointment. I'm still gonna go, I'm still going to speak, and I'm going to speak out about what I experienced. We need more coverage on this. Okay, continuing along, this is Representative Summer Lee talking about the boycott, because there were many Democrats who did not end up attending the State of the Union, so let's hear from her. She is a really great representative, very progressive, actually, like, advocates for marginalized people on an intersectional basis, just across the spectrum. And I think she's a representative for Pennsylvania, but I really like her.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. On Tuesday night, Congresswoman Summer Lee of Pennsylvania gave the Working Families Party response to Trump's State of the Union.
So let's start with a simple truth. What we are witnessing from our government is authoritarianism. Any response that doesn't acknowledge that truth is a disservice to Americans who deserve and need honesty right now. I listened to Donald Trump's speech tonight. While Trump and his friends profit off his presidency, he's gaslighting us. He wants to convince working families that we're better off under his regime. But we know the truth. Our country is in crisis. For millions of Americans, affordability is out of reach. Trump has driven up the unemployment rate, cutting thousands of federal jobs across the country. Everything he does is making Americans less safe at home and abroad. He's bringing us to the brink of wars in the Middle East and South America. And at home, ICE agents are hunting down human beings and cities are under siege. The FBI is raiding election offices in Georgia. Students are being disappeared for protesting tyranny and genocide in Palestine. The environmental protections we earned after a generation of advocacy are being stripped away.
That was Pennsylvania Congresswoman Summer Lee giving the Working Families Party response to the State of the Union. Joining us now from Capitol Hill, Congressmember Lee, if you can carry on from what you were saying last night, you did not attend the state.
This red lip on her is gorgeous. Also, that color, that burgundy color on her was stunning. Just like, so she knows what she stands for. She knows what she stands for and is able to speak from the heart. And there are very few people who are in power right now who are able to do this. But the Working Families Party does some really great work. And we need to be highlighting what they're doing because they truly are for working families. Like the people who claim to be pro-life, okay, interesting. Mostly just trying to support their like white supremacist great replacement theory tactics as opposed to like helping families and actual children.
The union. Tell us why as well.
Because the president's disgraceful, and I don't think it's worth our time to give him an audience. That's what he wants. He wants to be able to tell us to our face lies and gaslight us to our face. And the reality is that we have better things to do at our time. And I think that there are people who deserve our attention far more than he does.
So talk about the People's State of the Union. The People's State of the Union on the Mall last night with many Congress members like you as well as senators
getting the
speaking
point
out.
across.
I think it was an opportunity for us to get in front of the people who are harmed most by Trump's and Republicans' policies. Right now, people in this country, they really want an end to the status quo. They don't care about the pomp and circumstance and the decorum of this institution. They're wondering why we're not disrupting or doing things differently, or at least not giving any more credibility to this administration. So the People's State of the Union, I was grateful for, because it was an attempt for us and an opportunity for us to walk away from him, to walk or turn our backs on a president that is insistent on lying to us and just talking straight to the people about a truth that they were just not going to get last night. And that started obviously before the State of the Union, but there was no reason for any of us to believe that this would be the first night that he finally actually tells the American people the truth about the state, the truth about his policies, and the truth about what his intentions are for the country.
As you stand at the rotunda, I'm reminded that the House Speaker has said that Jesse Jackson's body cannot lay in honor in the Capitol, as John Lewis did, as Rosa Parks did. Can you talk about
this is
the significance
really
of this
shameful.
and what Jesse Jackson meant to you?
Certainly, I don't find that shocking. This whole administration, this past year, has been about attacking Black folks, attacking our history, attacking the legacy that has been created out of movements like the Civil Rights Movement, like the Black Power Movement, and so many more. So for him to kind of try to insult the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his legacy at this last final resting point is not shocking. But the reality is that he could do no such thing, right? What Reverend Jesse Jackson has done and what he has meant to this country is not interrupted or is not changed by the fact that Donald Trump would not do right by him in this last moment.
Yes,
this is a
exactly.
man who, aside from it has impacted people in my district, in my life, me, myself, around his ministry, his activism, his politics, laying the groundwork for more progressive campaigning. When there is a desperate need for an alternative message and for alternative ways of doing your politics, Jesse Jackson came and ran for president. He set the foundation for so many people after him, including me, to run on a progressive, unapologetically bold platform. So I'm grateful for the work that he's done, whether or not he is in the rotunda or not. We still honor the history. We still honor the work that he did. But more importantly, we recognize that right now more than ever, we have to carry on the work. That what those civil rights activists, heroes, movement leaders did in 50 years ago is still happening right now, and that we have to re-up that battle. So right now, listen, don't focus as much on that. Focus on the attacks, not on his person, on attacks, not on his final, his final farewell. Focus on the attacks on his work.
Let's go back to President Trump criticizing Democrats last night for not supporting the SAVE Act, which voting rights advocates warned could disenfranchise millions.
And the reason they don't want to do it, why would anybody not want voter ID? One reason, because they want to cheat. There's only one reason. They make up all excuses. They say it's racist. They come up with things. You almost say, what imagination they have. They want to cheat. They have cheated. And their policy is so bad that the only way they can get elected is to cheat. And we're going to stop it. We have to stop it, John.
So that was President Trump last night. I'm looking at a piece in The Hill saying, in fact, instances of non-citizen voting are exceedingly rare. A 2016 general election study showed an estimated 30 incidents of suspected, not confirmed, non-citizen votes out of 23.5 million, which is 0.0001% of the votes cast. Voter fraud generally also exceedingly rare. Numerous studies have found fraud rates that are just a fraction of 1%. Talking about Trump's claims of widespread fraud in the 2020 election rejected by 62 courts that reviewed the matter. If you could comment further, Congressmember Lee, on what President Trump is trying to do here by questioning the legitimacy
I really
of
like
U.S.
her
elections.
for showing this genuine emotion, rolling her eyes, shaking her head. We aren't getting this enough from representatives. And she has been consistent with her viewpoints, with her stances on things. So, like, we need to keep listening to what she has to say.
We all know what he's trying to do. When you take away the lie, and it's not just on this topic, when you take away the lie, there is no foundation for President Trump. There's no foundation for any of his cronies to stand on. They have to lie to people to get folks round up. They have to lie to get conservatives to participate or to at least not come to the side of where people are actually fighting for their interests. They don't want people to vote. They don't want people who won't vote for them to vote. So clarification, they don't want people who will vote for them to vote. So whether that's black folk or old or disabled people, they don't want you to vote because they want to continue on a system that has been rigged against you and in favor of them, of him and Elon Musk and his family and his friends and all of his friends who are on the Epstein files with him. That's who he has consistently protected. That's who they're protecting right now when they don't release the rest of the files. It is the same story over and over and over again. But we know the truth, right? As you said, the facts, the data, it speaks for itself.
Tying it to these other issues.
There is negligible amount of voter fraud. But instances of people, especially our elders, especially disabled folks, especially rural folks being able to access adequate ID is a real issue. So why in a country, right, as well run as we say ours is, why would we make it harder for people to vote? There is no other explanation.
I want to go back to President Trump speaking about Iran.
After midnight hammer, They were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons. Yet they continue. They're starting it all over. We wiped it out, and they want to start all over again.
No. Why
And
do
they're
they
at this
still have a
moment again
program then if you said that it's all wiped out? Why are they able to, why are they viewed as a threat still?
Their sinister
It's so wild.
ambitions. We are in negotiations with them. They want to make a deal, but we haven't heard those secret words. We will never have a nuclear weapon.
A massive U.S. military presence has been moved near Iran. Congressmember Lee, your response to what President...
Okay, to me, it seems like the only way Iran can prevent U.S. and Israeli aggression is by having a nuclear weapon. Because we saw with Trump and Pete Kegsbreath, the Department of War, which is just so ridiculous, that they're just bombing Iran and they want to be able to do whatever they can with impunity so that they aren't held accountable, because if they did have a nuclear weapon, it means that they would have more of a defense and the US couldn't act however it wanted.
Trump is threatening.
Again, he started the speech off by saying that he alone ended 6 or so wars, while also using this opportunity to threat another country, to threat another endless war, to threat countless people who have been tied up in these endless wars that the United States continuously finds itself in. I think that President Trump has completely abandoned any form of diplomacy. He has completely abandoned any responsibility as a country as powerful as us with our weapons, with our military, to be a positive force in the world. And it isn't just Iran. He's doing this in Gaza. He's done this in the Southern Hemisphere. He's done it with Denmark. It is chaotic. It endangers us. And again, like I said last night, everything he does makes us less safe abroad, and makes us less safe domestically. And it's important that we call that out at any attempt that every day we fight to get more people to understand how dangerous his presidency is and how dangerous his policies and his rhetoric are.
Summer Lee, we want to thank you so much for being with us. Democratic Congress member from Pennsylvania, the first Black woman to represent Pennsylvania in Congress, gave the working families' response to President Trump's State of the Union. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe.
Oh, look, this is the next video that I'm wanting to play. Summer Lee, we need to be looking out for her. She really is a voice of reason and a strong orator as well. Actually has a backbone, a sense of morality. Doesn't seem bought by corporate interests. Okay. So, since I don't know what all these colors are doing. Okay, here we go. So Trump kept saying all of these lies about the economy and tariffs and how things are going very well, when in actuality we know that that is not the case. So I'm glad that they are bringing on someone who can actually speak to this, who is an expert, and report on the actual data.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. During his State of the Union, President Trump repeatedly hailed his economic record over the past year. He also openly criticized the Supreme Court again for striking down his global tariffs in a decision that's having major implications on the global economy. Less than half, 4 of the 9 Supreme Court justices attended the speech. This is part of what Trump said.
Everything was working well. Countries that were ripping us off for decades are now paying us hundreds of billions of dollars. They were ripping us so badly, you all know that. Everybody knows it. Even the Democrats know it. They just don't want to say it. And yet these countries are now happy, and so are we. We made deals. The deals are all done, and they're happy. They're not making money like they used to, but we're making a lot of money. There was no inflation, tremendous growth, and the big story was how Donald Trump called the economy correctly, and 22 Nobel Prize winners in economics didn't. They got it totally wrong. They got it really wrong. And then just 4 days ago, an unfortunate ruling from the United States Supreme Court. It just came down. It came down. Very unfortunate ruling. But the good news is that almost all countries and corporations want to keep the deal that they already made, right, Scott? Knowing that the legal power that I, as president, have to make a new deal could be far worse for them, and therefore they will continue to work along the same successful path that we had negotiated before the Supreme Court's unfortunate involvement. So despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful country-saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in, peace-protecting. Many of the wars I settled was because of the threat of tariffs. I wouldn't have been able to settle them without. Will remain in place under fully approved and tested alternative legal statutes. And they have been tested for a long time. They're a little more complex, but they're actually probably better, leading to a solution that will be even stronger than before. Congressional action will not be necessary. It's already time-tested and approved. And as time goes by, I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax, taking a great financial burden off the people that I love.
We're joined now by Joseph Stiglitz.
All of those peons. And people kept standing and clapping, just like between every break. And then Trump would like stand to the side and expect it. This is Führer behavior. And they are acting as such.
Nobel Prize-winning economist, Columbia University professor, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Professor Stiglitz is also currently the chief economist at the Roosevelt Institute. His latest book, just out in paperback this week, The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society. Professor Stiglitz, welcome back to Democracy Now! Your response, you're among the signatories, the economists who have signed a letter against the tariffs. Talk about the president's State of the Union and his argument for tariffs and against the Supreme Court. Two of his own appointees ruled against him.
Well, the speech was characteristic of Trump. Lies, misleading statements. I was with a group of a large number of Nobel Prize winners who predicted that he would be bad for the economy, and we were right. The tariffs are paid by Americans. They're not paid by the foreigners.
Yeah,
he says
and Americans
they
should be
didn't have any effect on
compensated for
inflation.
this. Not just the companies.
Inflation was going down, and if we compare where inflation would have been with where we are today.
Raiders. Welcome. Hello, Zach. Kraken Pill, Bounce House, Maiko Taiko. Good to see you. Good to see you. We're talking about the State of the Union, fecal matters. Welcome. And we're viewing a Democracy Now! Video where we have an actual economist speaking on what the state of the economy is, rather than these blasphemies that were being spewed last night. Hope you all are doing well. Let's get back into it.
It is estimated the average family is paying somewhere between $1,000 and $1,700 in extra money because of the tariffs. And you know, the irony is, he said it was going to bring back manufacturing jobs. Manufacturing jobs are down
I know.
in the United States.
I like
in
Democracy Now!'s
2025,
coverage.
when they were up.
Super Mario
under President
morality rate.
Biden.
I'm just
He doesn't
registering
talk about
that. What does that mean?
In fact, last year was one of the slowest growth in jobs ever in recent memory, about a quarter of what it was under President Biden. And interestingly, most or more than 100% of the jobs that were created were in the healthcare sector. Nothing to do with his tariffs.
I watched those as well. And I'm glad, because the empty seats, I think, sends a message. I've mostly just watched clips of people. I'm like, we don't need to give them the views, right? Oh, inside joke from a lecturer we watch. Okay, love. It's Zach's favorite Rick Roderick clip. He talks about the postmodern role of Super Mario in teaching children. Okay, I'm going to have to watch this. If anyone has a link, I'll get up on this so I can also be in on the joke.
At all.
Trump said in the past, we have the most people working in history. What is the state of unemployment, of livable employment, the overall economy?
Well, when the economy grows, more people in the country, yes, there are going to be more people working. That's true. The fact is the labor force participation has not gone up. Unemployment rate has gone up a little bit, not a lot. But what is striking is how weak the job market is. We've not created, as I said before, we've not created very many jobs, less than a quarter of what we had created under President Biden. And anybody with friends trying to get jobs knows what a difficult labor market today's labor market is.
I want to go back to President Trump speaking last night.
Now, the same people in this chamber who voted for those disasters suddenly use the word affordability, a word. They just
exactly.
used it.
All of the
Somebody
numbers
gave it to
they're
them, knowing
spewing
full
are
well
not
that they
correct.
caused and created the increased prices that all of our citizens had to endure. You caused that problem. You caused that problem.
Affordability, Professor
He's looking
Stiglitz.
rough.
We're speaking to you here.
He has been looking rough, but how he's just like clinging on to that podium for dear life, it seems. At the beginning, it seems like for these big speeches, he gets like his dementia medication where he gets like juiced, and then he actually has a little more energy than he normally does, but he was really running out of steam at the end. What's his life support? Exactly. It wasn't enough that people were standing and applauding him every 5 seconds as like his main life force. It came down to this wooden pedestal.
York, of course, the new mayor, Zoran
Thank you very
Mamdani,
much.
is sent the message to people all over the country, especially those who are considering elected office, or to die-hard politicians, senators, Congress members, that affordability was the word, was the issue people are most concerned about. What about President Trump mocking it?
Well, I think he's mocking the American people when he mocks the issue of affordability. The reason people worry about affordability is things are not affordable. And the other way of putting it
Imagine
is
that
the
person who ran on this issue is now claiming it's a hoax.
Now, one of the striking things about what President Trump has done, he talked about this tax cut, the biggest tax cut in history. He was wrong about that. As a percentage of GDP, it doesn't even rank near the top. But where it does rank at the top is that it was the most regressive tax cut. That is to say, the benefits went to the millionaires, the billionaires, the corporations, and those at the bottom paid the price. They paid the price with almost $1 trillion cut in Medicaid. And that was why the Democrats had insisted on the government shutdown. They said, you can't do that. That's just not right.
Yes,
that
exactly.
you would be giving a tax cut for billionaires
We're the
and asking
richest?
the poorest Americans not to have
What?
adequate health care in a country where health care
Hello,
has been
Stuart
so
Little
bad,
is my son.
so
This
bad
is my
that
partner.
life expectancy, even before the pandemic, was on the down.
Your final comments, Professor Stiglitz, coming off of what's considered one of the longest State of the Unions and assessment of this country
I
in modern
agree.
history.
Every time I say the username, I'm claiming Stuart Little as my kid.
Long speeches like that reminds me of Castro and other demagogues who just love, they get the platform, they just talk and talk and talk. But I think the striking thing is that in spite of the tariffs, that we're supposed to bring back manufacturing jobs are actually down. And in spite of the tariffs that we're supposed to eliminate.
Yeah, manufacturing jobs are down because they haven't done anything to create policy and build jobs that because of these tariffs that they have been sending these manufacturing jobs overseas. Oh, I apologize to this gentleman for stopping right there. Okay, that's a little bit better. So that is clearly what is happening. And many of these jobs are going to China. China is just running laps around us with the economy. They are really gaining momentum. Hello, welcome, Cryptic Damon, excuse me. Nothing concrete has happened to build that industry back. Exactly. There have been no incentives, and instead it's incentivizing people to send these jobs overseas where it won't be as expensive.
The huge trade deficit in goods, is actually up. So his policies have failed, even in the areas where he said, in the objectives that he set forth. So yes, his speech was filled with misleading statements, with lies.
Welcome, waxing philosophical.
We've come to expect that.
I like that
But in
username.
the core aspect of
Yeah,
his agenda,
no one is wanting to.
the numbers show
This is not
that he has dramatically
exactly.
failed
This
to
is
do
not a
what
stable
he promised.
environment with everything
Joseph
so
Stiglitz,
unpredictable.
Nobel Prize-winning economist, Columbia University professor, former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors. Professor Stiglitz is also currently the chief economist at the Roosevelt Institute. His new book, just out in paperback this week, The Road to Freedom, Economics and the Good Society.
I did not either.
Thanks for watching.
Mostly,
Democracy Now!
I've been
I'm
watching like various creators and streamers comment on it because I'm like, I don't want to give it the views. So of course it was just full of like untruths, blasphemes, lies, just all of this like made up bullshit, as we know. Surprise, surprise. So we can't trust anything he says. This is obvious. History has shown this. But it does look like there are more representatives who are willing to actually do something, like show more visible resistance, like people not going and boycotting. I think that's important. Yeah, why would I want to listen to a bunch of lies? Exactly. Okay, so this is a follow-up from yesterday. I was playing part of a hearing that they had with a whistleblower in ICE who was a lawyer who's training cadets on legal action and the constitutionality of what they can and can't do. He received a secret memo of these instructions to directly teach cadets to violate the Constitution. And that is really, I mean, that's just confirming what we already know, that they're already acting in this way. It's not because of incompetence, that they're actually being trained to do these kinds of things, to act in an illegal manner. And so this is important to have it on like the record in public discourse so that we can be more informed as to what is happening. But I was curious about the majority report and what they had to say on it as well. I did not watch with Peden and Riz to get through it. What secrets?
Former
Oh, whoops.
ICE agent who was apparently the whistleblower who
We'll get info here.
exposed the internal memo wherein ICE was communicating to its operatives that it no longer had to abide by the Fourth Amendment and that they did not need judicial warrants to crash into people's homes. He is now a former ICE agent. He may have been at the time. His name is Ryan Schwenk. He was not in an official congressional hearing, but rather a hearing held by congressional Democrats. I think they get the meeting rooms. They don't have subpoena power, I don't believe, because they don't.
They don't have a
they're not in the
majority.
But
Which, of course, no
this is also a
Republicans showed up to
preview
this.
in the event
Again,
that
surprise,
the
surprise.
Democrats
They
take the
haven't
House
been.
in the fall.
They're
We're gonna be
disinterested
seeing
in
a
all
lot
of
more
this
type
cruelty.
of thing, and they're going to be able to bring in witnesses who are going to be a little bit hostile. This one obviously wanted the opportunity to speak about what he saw.
I am here because I am duty bound to report the legally required training program at the ICE Academy is deficient, defective, and broken. 5 months ago, I was asked to teach the law to new cadets at the ICE Academy in Glencoe, Georgia, where ICE is training its new, inexperienced recruits.
Okay, what he's talking about is very important. This is off topic. What would we call this color of suit that he's wearing? Is this like a cobalt? It's bluish purple, but not. Maybe it's just the lighting as well. I feel like this is not as common. Of course, this is what I'm like latching onto. I'm like, what's the fashion? Cobalt, royal navy blue. Yeah, with like a hint of purple.
I volunteered, those without law enforcement training. I volunteered to take on this assignment
Probably just the
based on my
lighting.
experience
Yeah.
in law
The
enforcement
lighting is
oversight,
really abysmal,
including at the state
in
and
these
local level prior to my work
hearings.
with ICE.
Not flattering for anyone.
On my first day, I received secretive orders to teach new cadets to violate the Constitution by entering homes without a judicial warrant. For the last 5 months, I watched ICE dismantle the training program, cutting 240 hours of vital classes from a 584-hour program. Classes that teach the Constitution, our legal system, firearms training, the use of force, lawful arrests, proper detention, and the limits of officers' authority. For example, they ceased all of the legal instructions regarding use of force.
Yes.
This means that cadets are not taught what it...
Yeah. So he was an instructor at an ICE training academy, and apparently he had been an instructor since 2021. And which, I mean, who is like willingly working for ICE? I don't know. That makes you sus to begin with, in my opinion. Why do you want to work for this entity? But it is important to actually have whistleblowers come out and expose things. That's one of the only ways we're getting more accountability and evidence of what's happening behind the scenes, is that since we have a very flaccid Congress and representatives are not showing as much resistance, that we need people from the inside exposing things. And it's happening quite a lot. Not as much as in the first administration, because there's so many loyalists in place, but this is really important for having things on the record. He thinks that he was helping to make sure they stayed constitutional. Exactly. Yeah, so he probably is like, oh, I'm going to help law enforcement do this, but this is also like showing my ACAB tendencies. Like, I don't trust cops or law enforcement. They're just glorified cops, especially now.
To be objectively reasonable. The very standard which the law requires them to meet when deciding whether or not to use deadly force. Our jobs as instructors are to teach them so well that they can make split-second decisions about what they can and cannot do in life or death situations. Yet, in the name of churning out an endless stream of officers, DHS leadership has dismantled the academic and practical tests that we need to know if cadets can safely and lawfully perform their job.
I have some stickers that I made
All to
with
satisfy an
ACAB and
administration
sign
demanding
language.
they train
I'm still like
thousands
getting
of
it
new
already,
officers
but I'll
before
share
the end of the year.
once they're available
DHS told
if
the
you all are
public
interested.
that new cadets receive all the training they need to perform their duties, that no critical material or standards have been cut. This is a
lie. This is important to understand. First off, we should say that the two ICE murderers that have the most acclaim, we know less about the other people who have been killed in ICE detention. But the two murders that would have been caught on videotape who work for ICE, both of them are longtime ICE employees. So they are not part of this next wave who have not even received even the training that the first guys who used excessive force did. But people should understand this. The way that we had the torture scandal during the Iraq invasion and subsequent to that was not that these soldiers were ordered to torture, although in some instances they got explicit green lights. But essentially what happened was all the shackles were removed. All of the discipline, all of the explicit warnings against torture, all the explicit orders against torture were removed. That's all it takes.
I'm glad that he's bringing this up because all of these instances where we have not had accountability with law enforcement overreach and aggression, that it has led us to this fascist moment. And many administrations and many different representatives and people who have been in power are accountable for this, are complicit in all of these things that are happening. Like, it's not an accident that we've gotten here. We all know this. And because we haven't had accountability, because people have been too hesitant to actually take people to task because they protect their own, as we also know, we have seen that it is much harder to hold people accountable now. I didn't know the tactical rebrand was such a one-for-one. Yeah, exactly. It's like so many things are connected in how we have this complicity with these very violent, very fascist tactics that have just gone unchecked for years and years. So now we have all of these outsized powers that are not being held accountable, and we now have an administration and leader, president, dictator, who is really just like stepping on the gas. All of these things have already been created, like just setting the groundwork. So they haven't had to do much to implement these fascist policies. They did want to use, yeah, exactly, Guantanamo Bay. It's such a nightmare.
And then just pressured to get results. And that's exactly the dynamic that we're seeing here with ICE. We're not going to give you any constraints other than we need X amount of arrests and we need X amount of intimidation.
And X amount of officers to fill the large quotas that he's talking about, because it's instructive to view ICE not as a law enforcement agency that needs to have a certain number of personnel to do what it needs to do, but as a paramilitary force that backs up the fascist administration and is it's going to serve as an intimidating tactic at polling sites. I think we should anticipate that ahead
I have a little
of
trail
November.
mix.
But also as just,
Cranberry
a paramilitary
cashew.
force that can go onto the streets, brutalize citizens on
I have
behalf of the
this little-
administration. This
little
he was
cat
a former
clip
instructor down in Georgia.
or the
this guy.
bag, because the
He
zipper
testified
isn't
there that he was one of the two whistleblowers that
the little,
received.
it's not a zipper,
That came
whatever
out
this
and
is.
said
The
that they
lock
received
thing at the
those
top isn't
administrative,
working.
the secret orders regarding the administrative warrants, meaning we've spoken about this before on the show, but they call them administrative warrants. They're not a warrant. It's essentially a memo that says you can violate people's Fourth Amendment rights and go into their homes. Warrants have to be signed by judges, even the ones that are like, basically rubber stamped like FISA under the War on Terror. At least that had to be signed by a judge. It's not a warrant. They call it a warrant. It's not a warrant. And it just said, hey, you can enter private homes and violate the Fourth Amendment regardless, and made it so that those orders were only verbal, so there was no paper trail. I mean, they're obvious about how criminal this is. And then he mentioned there that basically ICE eliminated 240 hours from their mandatory 580-hour training program, and they specifically removed courses dealing with the use of force. So, and this is for the new recruits that we know they're culling from, essentially, Proud Boys and Patriot Front and all of the biggest MAGA supporters that are excited to sign up for ICE. Those are the people that receive the least amount of training. And to your most important point about this, the veterans of DHS and ICE still killed American citizens on our streets on video in front of everybody.
Yes, exactly. I'm glad she's bringing up this point. The people who are committing these grievous crimes have been working for ICE already for years. This just goes to show that the people in law enforcement, the people who are drawn to this kind of work and power, especially, that it is about domination and control and cruelty more than it is about, like, believing in law and order and human rights and legal norms, that they just needed an excuse to do what they're doing in brutalizing people and murdering people and kidnapping people. It is not an accident that we have so many people who are in these high-ranking law enforcement positions who are also part of the KKK. This can also be said with, like, many representatives. Like, when you looking at the State of the Union, I just imagine them with pointed hats, like white pointed hats with their hoods. That's what it looks like to me. It's a Klan rally. It's a Nazi rally. Like, so they're just acting in ways that have already been allowed for such a long time. And we can't separate this cruelty and the origins of law enforcement, especially in the US, coming from slave catchers, and how historically it has been so difficult to actually get accountability because they protect their own, and why it makes sense why they're all on board with this white Christian nationalist agenda. I feel like the militia groups have been prepping for an institution like this. Exactly. Like, since the Civil War, they've been doing this. It's like how former army people jump right into private mercenary work. Yes, exactly.
So this should not be used to bolster the Cory Booker arguments in the DHS funding fight about more training and more body cameras. This should just underscore how horrible this new crop of ICE agents is going to be and what's coming ahead of us.
It also shows what the intention to use these. I mean,
okay, not to, like, keep interrupting, but sorry, Sam.
People wondered.
Okay. I don't know if that's better.
Go.
I try not to pause when people are making a funny face. Not like they even know or care, but anyway. Oh, what was I just about to say? Yes. Okay. So something that I have been saying is, like, one of the reasons why he has been radicalizing white young men is not just because he needed their votes, but because he's been building an army. Like, there's a reason why, like, he hasn't been shy about being warmongering while also having this double speak of saying, like, I'm ending all these wars, or, like, whatever the fuck. And so, like, we have all of these young men who have been propagandized, especially in the US, since birth, basically, to be like, you should be interested in fighting and in warfare, that this is like a sign of manliness. And like just looking at all of the media, especially these like young men, these white young men consume, it is not an accident as well that these media platforms have been co-opted by these white supremacist billionaires who have a vested interest in the industrial war complex, that they are controlling what gets served to these people. Like, I used to work in social media management. I also used to work for the state government. And like, you can very specifically target people. The government has way too much information on everybody. And also realizing how the system is just stacked, I mean, like in many cases, in favor of the wealthy, of like whoever has money, whoever is willing to put in a lot of money for ads and also be willing to manipulate. They also manipulate these algorithms to uplift all of this white supremacist messaging. So it really is scary with what is happening, but slowly it does seem to show that younger people are starting to break away from this coalition, and a large part of it has to do with the Epstein files. War on fraud. Yeah. It's how he said that in the State of the Union. He was like, it's our war on fraud. That's like, okay, the biggest fraudster of all time, basically, talking about a war on fraud. Like, we're living in a George Orwell novel.
To Minneapolis in the dead of winter. And, you know, obviously there was a compulsion to go there because you have a large Somali population. Donald Trump was really jazzed up about his racism was in high gear in terms of Ilhan Omar.
Islamophobia,
Rufo,
anti-black sentiment,
guy,
it's
big,
Klansman
Republican
behavior.
Operative, had already started to seed the story of Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization tied in with the Medicare fraud story, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things there. But from a almost like a military perspective, invading the coldest region of the country at the coldest time of the year does not make a lot of sense unless you want to make the deployments that everyone else is going to have come the summer seem a lot easier. And so, you know, summer they are aiming for the months from like May or June.
I've been thinking about this as well.
The election. That is what's going on here.
Yeah,
And so,
we're going to see a ramp up
understand
that will be really
the lack
intense.
of training is not because they're in a hurry. The lack of training is because they don't want these people to have constraints or any type of discipline that might come with training. So that's all deliberate. Meanwhile, one of the things, and we're going to be talking in a moment to Alexandra Avina about the historical context of what we're seeing in Mexico and what we're seeing go on right now after the killing of El Mencho, who was one of, if not, I think Mexico's most wanted man, and what we're seeing across large swaths of Mexico in terms of the Jalisco cartel striking back. One of the things we've seen from the right is them saying, like, this is what DHS is doing. It's keeping this element out of the country, which, of course, is absurd because we have seen ICE in action. And unless this cartel in Jalisco is made up of moms and dads and teenage kids or people who are working on roofs or, trying to get day job, whatever it is, or American citizens for that matter. It's obviously not the same people, but they are so desperate to make this connection. Here is Senator Mike Lee. Let's just see Mike Lee's tweet first, if you can just zoom in on that one. What's that? It's in all of them, but I want to just focus on his tweet first, where he writes.
Mike Lee, I'm in Utah. He's a senator for Utah. he is a complete disgrace to the state and has been ever since he's been in power. And the state really despises him. A lot of people despise him, but it also just goes to show how there are so many people that are willing to just vote for the status quo, that they are not involved politically, or they don't, it's not even like they really like Mike Lee a lot of the time, that they are just like, oh yeah, he's in power and I'll just like vote for him again. And he is wanting to sell off public lands. Yeah, he is such an asshat. He was recently stopped from starting to sell public lands, but that doesn't mean that his interest is not there. He's also deeply invested in the private prison system and has been a huge proponent of this political violence that we've seen in the nation, like with Melissa Hortman and her husband and dog that were killed last year in political violence. Which, like, the people on the right, like, they didn't talk about that at all. But then once Charlie Kirk was killed, then they were like, oh, political violence, like, we need to take the temperature down. Okay, if you're interested in this, maybe, like, you should tell everyone to, like, not be praising this kind of violence. People put up with severely low standards of public service. Yeah, exactly. Especially when people don't feel like they are personally affected very much. It is really hard for people to want to see through that kind of privilege or try to understand what other people are experiencing too, because then it makes them realize that they are benefiting from the oppression of others. And many people are not willing to engage in that kind of critical thinking. So he is a shithead. We know this. We are not surprised that he is continuing to spew all of this vitriol.
Okay, here it is. Mike Lee shows a picture of some Jalisco cartel wearing masks at a gas station, pouring gas on the ground, and then they ultimately light it. I've seen this video. It's pretty disturbing. But Mike Lee writes, cartel hitmen wear masks. Leftists aren't complaining. Now,
that's not the point I think you want to make, buddy.
Well,
yeah,
it's not the point he wanted to make.
So big.
Yeah, so are you comparing ICE to a cartel then? That is maybe one of your more accurate comparisons. What an idiot.
Many senators not known for their crap posting were able to dunk on Mike Lee. But this shows like how this is a senator. It shows how twisted their mentality is. Put up this, let's do the series of it. Brian Schatz wrote in, Mike, I would like ICE to have the same standards as a local police department, not cartel.
Exactly.
I mean, to be fair to Schatz, he might be the best Senate poster of all of the Democrats, so he got him here, up against base Mike Lee.
But even
Chris Murphy?
Yes. Oh, dear, Mike, I literally couldn't make our argument better than you do. The bad guys wear masks. The good guys don't.
And here's the big one.
And
oh, buddy, retire, Mike Lee.
Yes.
Chuck Schumer
wear masks. That's why ICE shouldn't.
Man.
Nailed it. Nailed it.
That's Sam who's speaking right now. That's his impression, the voice he always does with Chuck, which doesn't really sound like Chuck Schumer's voice, but it is just amusing anyway.
Nailed it, says Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
Oh, that's literally like getting knocked out by the smallest kid on the playground. You've got to change schools.
But even in that tweet.
Yes, he did. He failed the easiest layup ever.
So maybe you guys should suggest.
Exactly.
Yes,
and now we have Hakeem Jeffries also being like, well, I guess ICE, like, it's okay if they have masks sometimes. And it's like, no, we know that, like, you're probably getting money from someone who is interested in this. That's what's happening.
I'm uncomfortable with them wearing
I don't want to tell you how to live.
Exactly. It's like even in that moment, it's a...
Pull your pants up and take your mask off.
There's a softness to it.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.
Okay. So, speaking of Utah and assholery happening in Utah, this is a recap of what has been happening in the Utah legislative session. Of course, this is an update for February 6th, and it is not February 6th anymore, so there are other updates from this legislative session that I'll talk about as well. This is the nightmare fuel of living in the state of Utah. It is not an accident, like I've said before, that the national regime is implementing many policies that have been tried out in Utah, places like Tennessee and Florida and Texas and Idaho, where they are bastions of a lot of white Christian nationalists. And Utah has a very Zionist perspective and leaning. Like, there is a park called Zion's National Park because there is this idea, Mormons, I grew up Mormon, of colonizing the land violently and forcing indigenous people out, and that there is this religious claim to the land. And what they're trying to do with like slashing corporate regulations with the environment, that already has been a huge issue in Utah. We have some of the worst air pollution in the world. Like, that happened like a month ago. Like, we, for a week, had the worst pollution in the world, more than New York City, more than LA. It was up there with New Delhi. I've been to New Delhi, and there are days where you like can't see a block ahead because the air pollution is so bad. So this is one of the reasons why I think it's important to talk about all of this stuff.
The Hinckley Report. With week 3 of the session in the books, legislators make moves to reshape Utah's courts. Lawmakers debate tax cuts while state agencies defend their budgets. And a new lawsuit makes waves in the battle over Utah's congressional districts.
Funding for the Hinckley Report is made possible in part by the Cleone Peterson Eccles Endowment Fund and by donations to PBS Utah from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Hinckley Report. I'm Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics. Covering the week, we have...
Just as background, the name Hinckley is a very Mormon name. There was a previous president of the Mormon Church, or prophet, as they think of him, who was named Gordon B. Hinckley. So we have no separation of church and state, essentially, in this state. So it's not an accident as well that there are all of these like programs and institutions that are for the government, but are also named after these Mormon families.
Senator Jen Plum, a Democrat from Salt Lake City and minority assistant whip in the Utah Senate. Senator Mike McKell, a Republican from Spanish Fork and majority assistant whip in the Utah Senate. And Daniel Woodruff, politics reporter with KSL. Thank you so much for being with us. Week 3 of the session. Does it feel like week 3?
No.
Yes.
I just say yes and
says
no.
no.
Yes and no. The heat's up and also the fatigue's real. So there you go.
Yeah, it's starting, and so many bills, record number of bills coming out. I want to talk about that for just a moment. But Senator McKell, let's start with you on. It's interesting that one of the very first bills passed, definitely one of the very first bills signed by the governor already, has to do with the courts. We suspected there will be some conversation about the courts. Talk about this when it comes to expanding the Utah Supreme Court.
Yeah, and let's just look at it from a broader perspective. We did expand the Utah Supreme Court. I think there's been some need there. But we also expanded 2 judges on the Court of Appeals. We also expanded 3 district court judges. Senator Plum and I both will have a judge in the areas we represent. The 3rd District Court up in Salt Lake will have another district court judge. The 4th District Court down in Utah County.
I heard from somewhere
and the big need
that
down
there
in
are so
Washington
many
County.
bald men in
So
Utah
the 5th District
because
Court, there are a lot
there
of needs. Our
is so
state
much
is growing. When you
inbreeding.
look at states that are similar to our size,
Because
most of the states have 7
especially
members in the Supreme Court.
Mormons
We did
marry
expand.
Mormons,
But that
and
comes with
I
additional
think that's
resources
funny.
as well. That includes 4 additional law clerks on the Supreme Court. A lot of need for a lot of years. Obviously, there are some folks that didn't want to see the Supreme Court expand. I think there's pretty broad consensus that expanding the Court of Appeals was needed, as well as those district court judges. I feel really good about where we landed that. I'm glad we've got that through early in the session.
Daniel, what are you hearing about this one? Because there are definitely 2 sides of this, including from the side of the court.
The Utah State Bar was pretty opposed to the expansion of the Utah Supreme Court, and they held a press conference this week, a pretty lengthy one, talking about that, although curiously, they held it after the bill was already law. Governor Cox signed it very quickly last weekend, and then they held their press conference on Tuesday. But they had a lot of concerns about that generally and about the overall broader issue.
Governor Cox is like a outwardly congenial version of Mike Lee, the senator. So Governor Cox is a snake. He says whatever he needs to get elected. Mike Lee just doesn't even care anymore because he has his bigoted base that supports him, where he gets enough of it, and also people who are disinterested, that they just go with the status quo, like we were talking about before. But Mike Lee previously had been supposedly a supporter of like highlighting Pride Month and talking about how queer people should be viewed with respect. But now, of course, he's like signed all of these bills to make sure that like trans kids can't participate in sports, that there are these bathroom bills that they have imposed on people. As someone who worked for the Utah government as a public employee, I was subject to these laws, and it like the logistics of what it's like to live under that. It's just all meant to force people out of public service. Hi, example. But it just is meant to empower people to discriminate and make it so that like life is so uncomfortable for anyone who does not fall within their like acceptable viewpoint that they can no longer have a career.
Now for a couple of years in a row that they perceive the legislature is coming after the courts, that they've been unhappy, the Republican-controlled supermajority over some decisions from the Supreme Court and district judges, and that they are coming after the courts with an effort to remake the judiciary. That's the complaint from people like the Utah State Bar. Certainly a debate to be had about whether that's the case, but they had a lot of people stand up and talk about various bills and proposals that they feel like gets into the independence of the courts, which is a separate branch of government.
Well, and that's the challenge, I think, a little bit of that, what are we doing?
Yep,
Why
Republican
are we doing it,
supermajority.
that I observed from constituents and from folks who are worried about this, that the timing made people have some suspicions that this was a...
Which also, and I don't know if they're going to talk about this, there has been an effort to gerrymander in Utah, and we are seeing all of these fraudulent signatures. So of course the party, like we know that every accusation is a confession, as people have been saying, that they're trying to claim that there's all of this fraud happening on the grassroots level when it comes to progressive politics, which is just not the case. And they are engaging in all of this fraud where they are finding that all of these signatures and names and addresses are just made up. And so it is so interesting that they are worried about a district in Utah possibly being more Democratic, which essentially means that they're looking at the racial makeup of the area and they're viewing that there are more people of color in certain areas and that they feel threatened. But this is happening in Utah, like very, very red Utah, very Republican Utah. And this shows how deeply unpopular as well that Trump and his administration is. And hello, Turd Bomb, 420 South, 69th. Wait, what is this? What is this address? Yeah, almost every accusation is a projection. Yeah. So, for I get what you're saying. It's just a made up. That took me a second. Exactly. Where they're just making things up, and it just goes to show that they are losing a lot of support. That even in Utah, they feel like they're losing support. Yeah, you're right. That probably is an address. Probably in several places. I got there eventually.
What kind of court load, or excuse me, caseload was there? What kind of backup was there? Given that there had been these controversial decisions to some recently, whether it was about boundaries or abortion, but that there, I don't know, some felt the optics were off. I ultimately felt better knowing that we were expanding these lower courts, because you don't increase a judiciary's power to do more by just increasing the top. You have to get the whole way up. So I do think that we did good work, and I do also see why folks had concerns.
Mm-hmm. Senator McKell, related to this, we talked about this constitutional court on the show last week on the Hinckley Report. Some changes have happened since then. I think you've been connected to those changes. Talk about how this constitutional court has changed and why.
Yeah, so we are considering a constitutional court. That bill is coming through the Senate right now. And the big change is that'll be a panel of judges, and it'll do a standard rotation. I'm an attorney. When I file a lawsuit in the 4th District Court, for example, where I'm at, that just gets assigned randomly to a judge. And that's what we envision with this constitutional court. You'll have a panel of 3 judges, and those cases will be assigned on a rotation. The idea that you could forum shop, it wouldn't happen in that scenario. But just going back to the expansion of the Supreme Court, just briefly, I'm an attorney. I hear from a lot of attorneys across the state that they're very appreciative of the expansion of the Supreme Court and those court resources. I've heard privately from a number of judges, more judges than I would have expected, that have reached out to me privately thanking the legislature for doing that.
Thanks for being here, Bounce House. It was good chatting with you.
There are a lot of attorneys that see it differently than the Utah State Bar, and that's kind of been a theme. I've been in the legislature for 14 years, and unfortunately, I think the bar is fairly isolated from the rest of the attorneys throughout the state, and it's just an unfortunate trend.
Yeah. Senator Plum, talk about that one too, because it does seem like there's several of these bills. I think we've seen all that we're going to, but just a really quick recap from your side of the aisle on this issue.
Well, I think that, and my
Senator Plum, as background, she is one of the few legislators who is actually willing to listen to marginalized groups and advocate for more social justice measures. And so, like, when I worked for the government, when we would talk about, like, tobacco laws, because I was in the tobacco program, she was, like, one of the few people who would actually be willing to talk about how communities of color, marginalized groups, are disproportionately affected by the negative health outcomes of tobacco and nicotine use and addiction and dependency, and was willing to actually use more of this language, which is important because we couldn't say a lot of stuff. Like, personally, I was in media and there was a lot of censorship happening, and so they would say, like, oh, you can't talk about this specifically, but try to, like, get advocates on the outside that could say more things. And she has been a reliable ally in that way. That's not to say that, like, she doesn't have, like, problematic aspects as well, but especially for Utah, she has been on the right side of history for the most part.
Senator Pitcher has been pretty vocal on this as someone who exists within the judicial system. And it has felt like there is an attack on the judiciary, and that there has been kind of, to some, what feels like an undermining. And for me, one of the frustrations about that was we weren't having as many conversations about that within our communities and within our spaces, because there were a lot of distracting bills that were coming, especially out of the House, that had people's kind of wow factor. And I wish we would have been able to have more conversations about them, because when we do sit and talk about them, we can find the sense pieces where we may find more kind of consensus. But we didn't, I feel like, have enough conversations around those for a lot of folks. within my spheres to feel like they were heard.
And I would add too, Jason, on the judiciary, it's interesting to have heard from the governor on this issue. When the session was beginning, we sat down with him to talk, and he was very supportive and obviously signed the bill into law that expanded the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and the district courts a little bit. But he also noted that he feels like a lot of the bills from previous years that have become law are still being implemented regarding the courts. And he wanted to sort of see those play out a little bit. And he noted, I think fairly strongly in our interview, that he has less of an appetite this year for further bills on the judiciary than he's had in quite some time.
Senator McKell, all of this at least has some connection to redistricting. That's certainly why we started talking about the courts so much. And talk about this very interesting federal lawsuit. This week, Representative Burgess Owens and Congresswoman Celeste Malloy. Interesting, they have filed a lawsuit saying that the maps in play in the state of Utah would suffer, and Utahns would suffer irreparable harm if that new congressional district map was put in place.
This
I'll
is
tell you, Jason, that's a
the
difficult
situation
issue.
I
There's
was
a lot of
referring
chaos
to.
surrounding the elections. I know I get asked. I get asked in town hall meetings about that and what's going to happen next. And to be honest with you, I don't know. It's not clear in my mind. I certainly feel like Congresswoman Malloy, Congressman Burgess Owens, they have standing to bring that suit. I think their rights have been impacted, but it's a difficult case. I think there's a lot of chaos that's been created by some of these decisions we've seen in the state. It's interesting that has come up.
They're doing it at the behest of their Führer. That's what's happening.
Federal offices, but now we've got a dual track with a federal lawsuit and a state lawsuit, and I just say buckle up. There's a lot of chaos, and we're going to have to see how it plays out.
Irreparable harm is an interesting choice of words, right? Because there are a whole lot of Utahns who feel like they've been irreparably harmed by not being represented. And there were a whole lot of Utahns who voted for
Talk about
the
it,
ballot
Jennifer.
initiative that put this whole process into play. So I suppose I have a little less sympathy/empathy for people who have something to lose when there's a whole lot of Utahns who feel like they have not been represented and have lost a lot.
Well, one of the options underway, Daniel, is a potential initiative to get rid of the Proposition 4, and it's by signature gatherers that are happening right now. I just want to talk about what's happening right there because there are 2 weeks to get the signatures in. As of this airing of the show, they've verified 72,000 signatures to eliminate that Prop 4. They're going to need about 75,000 signatures in the next little while. Talk about that because there's just a lot of controversy around the signatures themselves. Are they going to make it? Are they going to get in all the districts they're supposed to be in?
Yeah, it's been a big activity. I was at Costco yesterday and got approached by a signature gatherer. I politely declined to sign because I don't sign petitions as a reporter. It's not my role, so I report on them. But the issue here, I think, is we have heard kind of from both sides of the signature gathering effort. Will they get enough? Will they not? I think that's one thing. But we have reported on people who have felt misled by signature gatherers and characterizing what they're actually signing. You're overturning Proposition 4 through your
fraud is another way to say that.
There are some signature gatherers, as we've reported, that are saying other things that are trying to get people to put their name on that. On the other hand, we've heard of signature gatherers being assaulted and being accosted and physically taking their papers and ripping them and things like that. Police departments have confirmed this. And so it's been a very contentious issue. I think over these next 2 weeks, you'll see an all-out push to get those signatures because, as you mentioned, tens and tens of thousands remain. In order to get that, not only do they have to get a number of signatures, they have to meet a certain quota in, I think it's 15 of the 29 Senate counties. And so there's a fairly high bar for them to reach. We'll see if they can.
Yeah, I think on this one, I think it's an 8% threshold, 26 of 29, I think is the requirement, which is quite a few of those districts. And Senator Plum, talk about this because Daniel is so right about this. People are being accosted because of this, a lot of discussion, and even the Utah County clerk is saying there may be some fraud associated with some of the signatures.
It sure feels a lot different than any of the other signature gathering spaces I've witnessed or been a part of. I think that when there was a signature gathering effort that went towards the repeal of 267, which was the union bill, we saw a huge push out across the state.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So essentially, it is a way to, a new district will be created in Utah, and the reason why it's causing such a stir is that it is primarily an area where there are people of color living, and so they are essentially racially gerrymandering what is happening because they don't want to have another seat in Congress go to someone who might be progressive. And so what they're doing is they are going across the state and trying to gather signatures to say that, like, we don't need this. We don't need this new district, that it is taking away from representation, even though there are so many people, as Senator Plum was saying, there are so many people in Utah who already don't have representation because we're in this conservative supermajority. But they have to have enough signatures in order to meet this threshold so that it will be on the ballot, that people can vote on it. But we are seeing a lot of fraud happening, surprise, surprise, where people are forging signatures and names and addresses, like the one that you submitted, and not that you put in the chat, not that you did the fraud. Just to be clear. And so it is at the behest of the Trump administration that they are doing this, and it is deeply problematic. We do have, I wanted to pull up this. Okay, this is an update. This was just 10 minutes ago released. So they're saying that it will meet the threshold. Possibly. People are projecting that it will, but also they are needing to take into consideration all of the fraud that is happening. So, okay. The effort to repeal Utah's voter-approved anti-gerrymandering law known as Proposition 4 is on the cusp of hitting the statewide signature threshold needed to qualify for the November ballot. However, signatures are still lagging in some Senate districts, and voters still have up to 45 days to remove their signatures. So nothing is certain yet, and Utah voters are still likely at least a month away from officially knowing whether the question qualifies for the November ballot. Yeah, of course. As of Wednesday morning, this morning, clerks had verified 140,662 signatures, 86 away from the needed statewide minimum of 140,748, according to the latest tally posted on the Lieutenant Governor's website. However, the group pushing the repeal, Utahns for Representative Government, still hasn't met signature thresholds required in at least 26 of Utah's 29 counties. So they have a lot of signatures, but for some reason, it's not meeting the threshold in all of these counties. Interesting. So far, enough signatures have been verified in 14 districts. Okay, clerks have until the end of the day of March 8th. Unless the effort fails to meet thresholds in at least 26 Senate districts come the end of the next week, Utahns likely won't officially know whether the repeal question will appear on their ballot until at least April. If the petition is successful, Lieutenant Governor Deidre Henderson is required by state law to declare so on April 30th, but if it fails, she can announce that determination before then. And then, meanwhile, the fight over Proposition 4 is also heading to court, which is where that lawsuit is happening with the representatives. So, mailing a letter complete with misinformation to prevent Utahns from exercising their First Amendment right is at best unethical. Providing payment in the form of prepaid stamped envelopes to entice Utahns into removing their signatures is illegal. Yeah, so they're intentionally making it pretty convoluted as to, like, is it for or against that you want to be signing? And that is part of the fraud, is that they are misrepresenting what is happening. And then also there is another aspect of the fraud where they are just, like, making up people and names. And so it's going to take a long time to verify this.
It went very professionally. It was thoughtful, it seemed to me. I didn't hear a whole lot of people saying that there was this kind of scuffle situation going on. And the number of texts I get from people who say, can you tell me what these signature gatherers are really gathering for? Because they're telling me it's this. has been a bit remarkable to me. So I think that there is likely further conversation for us to continue to have about signatures, whether that's in these ballot initiatives or our individual elections. This doesn't feel right. That being said, it is the process.
And Jason, you alluded to the investigation in Utah County into fraudulent signatures. The county clerk there has said they've identified a number of signatures that don't smell right, don't look right. And I think it's interesting that the Republican Party—
The last name Woodruff is a very Mormon name. There was one of the presidents or prophets of the Mormon church with last name Woodruff.
On both sides has been, I think, fairly consistent. He's condemned those who are attacking the signature gatherers, but he's also condemned anyone who would dare to submit a fraudulent signature. He says that this effort has no place for that, and anyone who's caught doing that has no place gathering.
Senator McKell, talk about where this initiative goes to repeal, because you think they're going to get the signatures? What do you think is happening overall?
Sounds just like Mormon baptism numbers. Exactly. Interesting. We probably have a lot of returned missionaries who are doing this, who is experienced in going door to door in a very propagandizing way and not respecting people's boundaries and making them feel pressured to pursue a certain line of action. Very small world out there. Yes, it is. And it's bleak. It's really annoying to live here sometimes. Okay. Since they're going to keep talking about this and it's later, much time has passed since this video was created, I do want to go over some of these things that are happening besides what they're talking about in the legislative session. So this is the ACLU for Utah, their website, and here are some examples of what is happening. So they are trying to limit education on having Planned Parenthood be able to teach reproductive classes. Yeah, insular, exactly. It's a very incestuous place in many meanings of the word. So let's look at this. Yeah, so it takes us to the Planned Parenthood website. So they are trying to ban Planned Parenthood from actually providing education in public schools, which already Utah has very little reproductive education. Their sex education, essentially, there is not birth control and contraceptives are not taught in schools. Instead, they teach abstinence. So it will come as no surprise why there are a lot of teen pregnancies in the state. And that is the intention of all of this, because it is meant to impose this religious belief on people. Here is another one that's happening. Respect means using correct names and pronouns. They're also trying to do this bill, which I think, is this the same one? I'm not sure. Where they're saying no, we have to say that there are only two genders. And so for people like me who are non-binary, genderqueer, anyone in between or outside of this binary, it is meant to push people out of public life. And I think that is written into this bill. So what they're saying is it will allow teachers and public employers to misgender and dead name students and coworkers without consequence, creating an unequal and unsafe environment. This is a huge attack on human rights in the state right now. They're also trying to get this voting by mail. Already what's happening, so the SAVE Act that is happening at the national level, there has already been something like that in Utah. That was passed in this last legislative session. That is essentially trying to, what it does is it makes it much harder for anyone who has had a name change of any sort, which includes married women, because let's be honest, people want to be back in the 1840s here. That's the mindset. And they are trying to claim it's to limit fraud and all this stuff and people who are undocumented, and really it's just to disenfranchise people and suppress the vote. There's also this about the death penalty. It would put oversized emphasis on a defendant's hasty IQ score, which is a racist, ableist metric anyway. The history of like developing IQ, what is very anti-Black, and has meant part of the reason it was created was to prevent Black people from being in public schooling and having education, require an IQ determination to be made within 10 days. So this is like extremely ableist and disgusting. And also there are these racial overtones already with the death penalty, how it disproportionately impacts people. And also now we have the racial overtones with using IQ as a measurement. Okay, stop this. I don't know what this is. Stop you to... Oh, okay. This is Pen America. They're highlighting this. I love this. I'm very passionate about this, which is why we have banned book club on this, which is what we will be doing right after I talk about all of this shit. Utah, second to Florida, is the state banning the most books. So books like The Giver, books like The Diary of a Young Girl that we were reading earlier, which is also commonly referred to as The Diary of Anne Frank. Utah leads the charge, second to Florida, in book bans. And this is largely due to no separation of church and state. And a lot of the time, these bans happen with people who don't even have kids in schools or kids who go to these public libraries. It's just meant to be this conservative effort to take away books. It's like, okay, but then you're also, how about we take the like parental rights avenue? Then you are taking away the rights of parents to have kids actually have a broader breadth of reading material instead of these other parents dictating what all of the kids can be reading. Okay, so that's a little bit of a taste of what's happening. Not to be like too depressing, but oh, here we go. Public employee gender-specific language requirements. Yeah, so meaning that we can't, that it's defining gender as only being a man and a woman. The Giver was like 1984 for kids. Opened my eyes to sociological control. Exactly. It was one of the books that I read, the first books that I read that I realized in a very tangible way that you can have symbolism and that sometimes there are adults that don't always have your best interest in mind, and that exactly what you're talking about, control, sociological control. Okay. I'll exit now that we're on that cheery note. So, for this week's reading, it was chapters 6, 7, and 8. And this is the part where they're going to the ceremonies, like the yearly ceremonies that they have, where kids don't have birthdays. They don't know how old they are really after the age of 12. They can go and check in like community records, but because they prioritize sameness, it means that they also don't choose their names. Parents don't choose names. That names are assigned to kids, but first they are given numbers, which is extremely dystopian. And with each year, when they have these ceremonies, there's like a certain level of like, oh, they get a bike this year. And they also impose like these very strict gender roles of like the girls have to wear ribbons this year. The girls get to take out their hair ribbons this year. They have to cut their hair at this point. And the last ceremony, which is the ceremony of 12, is the one where they get their assignments. And of course, like, this is where they stop having free time. So child labor, that is normalized. And we see in this that Jonas has already been expressing doubts about the system. He's very concerned about language that is being used and how it is policed. We also see how he's starting to notice some changes that are happening, like being horny, which is what they call stirrings, which honestly, especially as a kid growing up in Utah, where like this was not being talked about in schools that much or in like the home really, talking about like having like normal feelings of like arousal as a teenager was really healthy to learn about and be like, oh, this doesn't mean I'm bad or creepy or weird, that this is just like part of growing up. So he has been feeling that, and he has to start taking a pill for it, and they say it's treatment. So all adults have to take this as well. Yeah, if you want to reread, I think for this next one, we'll be going to chapter 12, if you're interested in joining. Okay, so they're going through all of the people and they're getting their assignments. So they start from the youngest up to the oldest, and each day through at this time of year, they go through certain ages, and so it takes like a week or so to get through all of the ages. And finally, the ceremony of 12, which is the last one, that's where they get their assignments for work. We already see that there is an established hierarchy of worth where people are, if they are not viewed as being as intelligent up to these arbitrary standards that the community has for intelligence and worthiness, that there are people who are assigned to be laborers, how birth mothers, the people who are like creating life, that's their job, is to like give birth. Which, by the way, that like tapped into, especially as someone growing up with a uterus, being conditioned female, and having a fear of childbirth for as long as I can remember, this like made me feel validated in that way of like, oh, there are some people, like there's a reason why you can be made to feel that your worth is only to have children, especially growing up Mormon, where there are very strict gender roles. But seeing that in a very stark way of like, oh, this is a society where that's all some people do, what that they are assigned. And it's viewed as like a shameful role, even though they're the people who are creating life. And then after they have 3 babies, then they are forced to be laborers. And people who are laborers, people who work night shifts, they are viewed as not having as much honor. And so that's deeply problematic. And it's all based off of eugenics, these sort of requirements that they're imposing on people. And anybody who has like a difference of some sort, it is viewed as uncomfortable and rude, essentially, like you're offending the community just by being different. So this is where Jonas is worried about what assignment he will get because it dictates the rest of his life. And people, like, once again, there are no choices in this community where they don't get to choose names, parents don't get to choose names, people don't get to choose spouses, that it is all assigned by the government, and their jobs are also assigned. So they get to choose their volunteer hours and kind of gather their interests, and they're observed, and it's also used as an excuse to overly surveil people, where they're like, oh yeah, they're just observing us because they want us to know, they want us to have the best job that fits us, when really they're interested in monitoring people's behavior, if people are acting out, and if people have enough strikes against them, they get released. And at this point in the book, it's not clear what exactly that means. We just know that it happens to all old people when they reach a certain age, and it sometimes happens to little children, little babies, new children is what they refer to them as, if they are not meeting these certain requirements. Okay, so Jonas is worried about not getting a job that he likes, and he isn't sure exactly what he will be assigned, and it goes through everybody. They go through everybody and give them an assignment, and he's passed over. And he's sitting there feeling a lot of shame, not understanding why he was passed over, and feeling like he let his family down. And then at the end, they announce this special role for him. So I'll read a little bit about this. So this is the chief elder who is speaking. Jonas has not been assigned, she informed the crowd, and his heart sank. Then she went on. Jonas has been selected. He blinked. What did that mean? He felt a collective questioning stir from the audience. They too were puzzled. In a firm, commanding voice, she announced, Jonas has been selected to be our new receiver of memory. Then he heard the gasp, the sudden intake of breath drawn sharply in astonishment by each of the seated citizens. He saw their faces, the eyes widened in awe. And still, he did not understand. Such a selection is very, very rare, said the chief elder. Our community has only one receiver. It is he who trains his successor. We have had our current receiver for a very long time, she went on. Jonas followed her eyes and saw that she was looking at one of the elders. The committee of elders was sitting together in a group, and the chief elder's eyes were now on one who sat in the midst, but seemed oddly separate from them. It was a man Jonas had never noticed before, a bearded man with pale eyes. He was watching Jonas intently. Jonas also has pale eyes, and so this new baby that his dad is helping to take care of also has pale eyes. And he feels self-conscious about it because everyone else, for the most part in the town, they have dark eyes. We failed in our last selection, the chief said solemnly. It was 10 years ago when Jonas was just a toddler. I will not dwell on the experience because it causes us all terrible discomfort. Jonas didn't know what she was referring to, but he could sense the discomfort of the audience. They shifted uneasily in their seats. We have not been hasty this time, she continued. We could not afford another failure. Sometimes, she went on, speaking in a lighter tone, relaxing the tension in the auditorium, we are not entirely certain about the assignments, even after the most painstaking observations. Sometimes we worry that the one assigned might not develop, through training, every attribute necessary. 11s are still children, after all. What we observe as playfulness and patience, the requirements to become nurturer, could, with maturity, be revealed as simply foolishness and indolence. So we continue to observe during training, and to modify behavior when necessary. Did they just off the last one? That's like what is ominous about it, is that like we aren't sure what happened. But the receiver in training cannot be observed, cannot be modified. That is stated quite clearly in the rules. He is to be alone, apart, while he is prepared by the current receiver for the job, which is the most honored in our community. Alone? Apart? Jonas listened with increasing unease. Okay. I'll just read a little bit more into the next page. Therefore, the selection must be sound. It must be a unanimous choice of the committee. They can have no doubts, however fleeting. If during the process an elder reports a dream of uncertainty, that dream has the power to set a candidate aside instantly. Jonas was identified as a possible receiver many years ago. We have observed him meticulously. There were no dreams of uncertainty. He has shown all of the qualities that a receiver must have. With her hand still firmly on his shoulder, the chief elder listed the qualities. Intelligence, she said. We are all aware that Jonas has been a top student throughout his school days. Integrity, she said next. Jonas has, like all of us, committed minor transgressions, she smiled at him. We expect that. We hoped also that he would present himself promptly for chastisement, and he has always done so. Courage, she went on. Only one of us here today has ever undergone the rigorous training required of a receiver. He, of course, is the most important member of the committee, the current receiver. It was he who reminded us again and again of the courage required. Jonas, she said, turning to him, but speaking in a voice that the entire community could hear, the training required of you involves pain, physical pain. And in this community, pain is not something that people experience. And they pride themselves on that. You have never experienced that. Yes, you have scraped your knee in falls from your bicycle. Yes, you crushed your finger in a door last year. So they know everything about everybody, which is creepy. Jonas nodded, agreeing, as he recalled the incident and its accompanying misery. But you will be faced now, she explained gently, with pain of a magnitude that none of us here can comprehend, because it is beyond our experience. The receiver himself was not able to describe it, only to remind us that you would be faced with it, and that you would need immense courage. We cannot prepare you for that. But we feel certain that you are brave, she said to him. He did not feel brave at all, not now. The fourth essential attribute, the chief elder said, is wisdom. Jonas has not yet acquired that. The acquisition of wisdom will come through his training. We are convinced that Jonas has the ability to acquire wisdom. That is what we looked for. Finally, the receiver must have one more quality, and it is one which I can only name but not describe. I do not understand it. You members of the community will not understand it either. Perhaps Jonas will, because the current receiver has told us that Jonas has already had this quality. He calls it the capacity to see beyond. The chief elder looked at Jonas with a question in her eyes. The audience watched him too. They were silent. For a moment, he froze, consumed with despair. He didn't have it, the whatever she had said. He didn't know what it was. Now was the moment when he would have to confess, to say, "No, I don't, I can't," and throw himself on their mercy, ask their forgiveness, to explain that he had been wrongly chosen, that he was not the right one at all. But when he looked across the crowd, the sea of faces, the thing happened again, the thing that happened with the apple. They changed. He blinked, and it was gone. His shoulders straightened slightly. Briefly, he felt a tiny sliver of sureness for the first time. She was still watching him. They all were. "I think it's true," he said to the chief elder and the community. "I don't understand it yet. I don't know what it is, but sometimes I see something, and maybe it's beyond." She took her arm from his shoulders. "Jonas," she said, speaking not to him alone, but to the entire community of which he was a part, "you will be trained to be our next receiver of memory. We thank you for your childhood." Then she turned and left the stage, left him there alone, standing and facing the crowd, which began spontaneously the collective murmur of his name. "Jonas." It was a whisper at first, hushed, barely audible. "Jonas, Jonas." Then louder, faster. "Jonas, Jonas, Jonas." With the chant, Jonas knew, the community was accepting him and his new role, giving him life the way they had given it to the new child, Caleb. His heart swelled with gratitude and pride. But at the same time, he was filled with fear. He did not know what his selection meant. He did not know what he was to become, or what would become of him. And that's leading into chapter 9. The situation with the apple is also very symbolic of, Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, where the first time he sees something that he can't describe, he takes this apple home, which is against the rules, and then he gets called out for it over this speaker because they use public shaming as a tool to also, along with surveillance, to impose control. And he can't describe what changed about it, but something did. And he's also noticing that with the faces of the audience there. And so we will see what that means. That's Banned Book Club. But I'm curious, just to finish off this discussion, I guess. I love what you said, Mike Otaiko, about it opening your eyes to sociological control. What were some of the aspects that you remember in the book, if you're comfortable sharing, that really stuck out to you? the instances of seeing that kind of control. And also for anyone else who has read the book, what were your impressions? What stuck out to you? How did it make you feel as you were reading it? I know there are... Sorry, I was just getting distracted, getting this next thing set up. I know that's also a lot of questions and stuff to type out. So feel free to take your time. Okay. While you all are thinking about that, I wanted to play that reference that you mentioned at the beginning of the raid. Let's take a look at that.
I talked about how children used to learn morality from their parents, and now I think that Super Mario Brothers, they spend much more time with Super Mario Brothers and are much more like emotionally involved with Nintendo than they are with their aunts, their uncles, their mothers, and their fathers. I asked one of my children, why are you yelling at a machine, when he began to bang his Nintendo? And he looked at me as though I were a being from another world. And because of that, there is a postmodern trajectory. I am from another world. I'm still, as it were, caught in the modern. He's not. Why not be emotional with a machine? His peers are machine-like. We've already discussed that. I mean, in fact, what he sees on the Nintendo screen is his thrill of the day. That's the most active he's seen any simulated image that day. Now, simulation, this society didn't just come from nowhere, the society of simulations and of spectacles. Baudrillard actually builds his work on a foundation, again, that comes out of the Marxist tradition. Guy Debord wrote a book in the 60s called The Society of the Spectacle. And what it was about how when capitalism reached a certain level of accumulation, commodities began to detach themselves and become images. And citizens who formerly had played roles as political actors began to detach themselves from their own lives and become spectators.
Wow.
So, for example, you could say, well, instead of like going to a family reunion now, we'll just rent, you know, a Steve Martin Father of the Bride movie. It's just as good, and so on, and you meet the same kooky characters that you actually know. Their behavior is all simulatable. Another similar, and this is going to sound cynical, but I don't want it to. I mean, Baudrillard has visited our country, and when he went to Disneyland and Epcot Center and these various parks, he said,
I was curious
well, this
about
is
that.
much better than Europe. The food's better than Europe. It's a short walk between France and Germany land. You know, you don't have to go through all those, deal with all those nasty waiters. Everyone's so polite. The simulation has outrun the so-called reality. That concept in Baudrillard he calls the hyper-real. Hyper-reality is more real than real. This is actually sounds, if some of this sounds like advertising slogans, good, because in Baudrillard, the heritage of philosophy and social theory has passed over into advertising and television.
Damn.
So,
I mean, I agree. I very much agree. That is cool. I'm gonna have to watch this. I'm gonna have to watch the full thing. Thank you for sharing this. The Super Mario is so funny. Okay. Going back to The Giver, things that stuck out most was realizing the structure they lived in. The regimentation was not that different from in real life, and also the releasing. Having seen The Matrix as a kid, yes. When it came out, I was just shocked by so many parallels of that as a possibility to kids. Made me really question requirements and institutional things like school going forward. Amazing. I guess when I was young, I never considered a child's place in maintaining the social order, till that book and others. I love that. I love that because it's true. You are just used to being told what to do and going about your life. And then when you're exposed to something where basically all of society can't be trusted, as you go on in the story, you realize that here is this kid who is acting in certain ways, that he actually is exercising his autonomy, and it's against like his parents and the elders and people who are making rules, where it's like you don't realize you can do that until you see examples of it. I love that. Thank you for indulging me. I love this. I'm such a nerd, but I love this book. I have said this before, but I was cheeky and emailed Lois Lowry to be like, here are some questions. What do you think about this? And she actually emailed me back and answered my questions. So at the end of reading the book together, I was going to read out her questions. Oh, I love book clubs. I think they're so fun. It's so good for my brain too. Okay. That's band book club. Shall we go to the Indigenous history of Wuthering Heights? So the other book on this stream, it's not a banned book, but it is the book that I read at the end of every stream. So I wanted to show this video, the Brigantes, Rome, and Caratakis, the epic history, nope. The epic story of a British Celtic tribe. All right. Because I am focusing on a decolonizing lens of Wuthering Heights. I think it's necessary, especially with Heathcliff being a person of color, especially with the recent adaptation of the movie, how once again Heathcliff is whitewashed. Jacob Elordi is cast as Heathcliff, and instead a man of color is, I think he's Afghani. He was cast as Mr. Linton, and so it essentially is just kind of invisibilizing the oppression that is built into the text and Heathcliff's characterization. So in order to continue this through line of decolonization, because it also references like mystic things and magic and dreams that also are part of more of these indigenous traditions in the area of York where it takes place. So let's take a look at this.
Britain, 43 AD, and the Emperor Claudius is about to embark on the second invasion of Britain. Roman tactics throughout Gaul and Britain was to ally themselves with those prepared to pay homage to Rome and make war on those who did not. Now, some tribes saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their own positions, and they formed alliances with the Romans. And one such tribe was the Brigantes of northern Britain. We know rather a lot about the Brigantes due to the writings of Tacitus. Although their history prior to the Roman invasion remains unknown. The Brigantes occupied a region in northern England, but there were tribes of a similar name in both Ireland and Gaul. But as to whether or not they were actually related to these tribes remains a question to be answered.
Its delivery is so intense. And the timing is as well.
As for the spiritual side of their life, they may have worshipped a goddess called Brigantia.
A long pause.
There has been a number of inscriptions found within their territory which relates Brigantia to the Roman goddess Victoria. But this may just be a coincidence of name, as we'll get to the etymology or the meaning of the name Brigantia. The name may be translated from the ancient Briton to mean high or elevated, and is associated with prestige, reputation, honor, and dignity. So this is a good name for both a tribe and a deity. Whether or not they are related is another story. Suspicions are that they may be, given that we find a number of inscriptions within their territory. Now, territorially, the Brigantes was the largest tribe in Britain, and they encompassed many sub-tribes. Amongst those were some of the tribes from the Yorkshire coast and those along the valley of the South Tyne. At the time of the Roman invasion, the Brigantes were ruled by a queen, Queen Cartimandua, and Queen Cartimandua had allied her tribe.
The captions are
with
egregious.
Rome.
They're auto-generated. I do have to say, there's very little on the Brigantes online from what I could find. This is one of the better resources I was able to
Other
find.
tribes, however,
That isn't
had
purely
not.
based off of the Romans.
The Cativalini, under its king Caractacus, resisted Roman occupation. But after many battles and many wars against the Romans, Caractacus was now a man on the run. And now he found himself in the land of the Brigantes. Now, whether or not he knew the Brigantes was allied with Rome, we don't know. All we know is that Queen Cartimandula had him placed in chains and handed him over to the Roman army. Now, We don't know if this was a catalyst for what was to follow. But all of a sudden, the Brigantes found themselves in turmoil, with a split between the Queen Catamandua and her husband, Venutius. So now, for whatever reason, Venutius took up arms against Catamandua, and he invaded her territory.
The background music sounds like it has a sitar, which is interesting. It's of Indian origin.
But Rome, seeing Catamandua as being a valuable ally, sent forces up to reinforce Catamandua, and with Rome's help, Venutius was defeated. So time went past, but Venutius was not done yet, and in 69 AD, he led another attack on Catamandua's territory. Only this time, he was going to take advantage of Rome's weakness after the death of Nero. In 69 AD, Rome went through a period of 4 emperors in a year, and this caused much unrest. And so for Venutius, he saw this as an optimum time to play his ace card and again take the territory of the Brigantes for himself. And this time, he was successful. Rome couldn't spare enough of the legions to help Catamandua. All they could do was to help Catamandua flee from danger. And so, the kingdom of the Brigantes was now under the kingship of Venutius. Now, after the accession of Vespasian, who had brought a new reign of stability to Rome, a new governor of Britain was appointed, and the conquest of the Brigantes was about to begin. Although this clearly took decades, as we have reports from many writers, some Roman poets and Greek geographers, and Tacitus himself tells us of the battles that continued on right up until the 2nd century. And we are told of the campaigns of Quintus Patilius Cerialis, who campaigned against the Brigantes between the years 71 to 74.
I'm going to let her in. I'll be right back.
And we also have Tacitus telling us about his father-in-law, Agricola, and his campaigns against the Brigantes in 78 to 84 AD. And it seems quite likely that the building of Hadrian's Wall was an attempt to stop the Brigantes from allying themselves with those tribes from the north. But then we are told by the Greek geographer Pausanias that the Emperor Antoninus Pius finally conquered the Brigantes after they had apparently started an unprovoked attack against some of Rome's allies. And it may well have been this that led to the building of the second great northern wall, the Antonine Wall, built by the Emperor Antoninus between 142 and 144 AD. And it is at this point in history where word of the Brigantes becomes silent, and we hear no more about this great fearsome tribe, the Brigantes, from this time on.
All right. A bit eccentric. Once you acclimate to the delivery, informative. I was looking, to be honest, looking for something that talked more about like the tradition of the Brigantes. I hadn't seen this video all the way through. So I'll do more of that research on my own, and then I'll talk about that tomorrow. Okay. Shall we get into the literature? So I wear gloves when I read books. I used to do this a lot when I was younger, just because I have very sweaty hands. And this version of Wuthering Heights is very beautiful and has like this filigree that my sweaty hands like makes it peel off. So here are my like opera gloves that I'm going to be reading with. Sometimes it makes turning pages into a trial, but I would rather have that than to destroy my books. Okay. Shall we? I know. It's so extra. Oh, that's me. All right. So we're in the middle of, well, not the middle, I guess, more at like the beginning-ish of chapter 10. We see that Heathcliff ran away after he heard that after he overheard Kathy say that she was going to marry Mr. Linton, Edgar Linton, he is of the family that lives in Thrushcross Grange, and she said that it would degrade her to marry Heathcliff, and so he didn't stick around to hear her also say that she loves Heathcliff. And what's happening in the book as well is that Kathy is extremely indecisive. She wants to have everything her way, and because she is not able to choose and commit to people, she ends up making everyone be miserable. That's not to say that like she doesn't have her own reasons and whatnot, but she's all of these characters are deeply flawed. And so, especially with this book, we have to take into consideration whether we have a reliable narrator or not. It is from the perspective of Mr. Lockwood, who is a recent tenant of Thrushcross Grange because Heathcliff bought Wuthering Heights and Thrushcross Grange as an adult. So this is his housekeeper, Mr. Lockwood's housekeeper, Nellie, also known as Mrs. Dean. She grew up with Heathcliff and Catherine. She is retelling their history to Mr. Lockwood. And Mr. Lockwood, to be honest, he's an asshole. He just is like expecting people to abide by his own customs, even though he's like coming into a place where everyone else has their own way of living. So he has like a colonizer mentality and it's like, oh, you're not being proper. And it's also like very classist. But we also see that like Heathcliff growing up, that he was favored by the father, which put him on bad terms with the biological son of the father. And there was this resentment growing. Heathcliff has been marginalized and oppressed, specifically because they don't know what his background is, his identity, but they describe him as having a darker complexion and eyes and hair, and that they call him the G word a lot, the G slur. So he could be of Romani descent. It is not clear, but also people of color, especially at this time, were often called the G word, just grouping people together and using a slur, a racial slur. So it's not clear what his identity is, like his ethnicity is specifically, but he is othered because of it. And that is intrinsic to his character development, which is my main issue with the recent adaptation of the movie. Okay, where did I end? Okay, so Heathcliff returns. Kathy ends up marrying Edgar Linton, and she's very excited that Heathcliff is back, and Edgar is very upset. And she's trying to talk to Nellie about it, who is her servant at the time. And Catherine isn't understanding why Edgar would be upset that she wants to be around Heathcliff or talk about Heathcliff. And she's like, but I like him, so you should like him too. But of course, he's jealous, and they also didn't get along when they were kids. Okay. So this is Nellie, Mrs. Dean, the housekeeper, as the narrator right now. Heathcliff, Mr. Heathcliff, I should say in future, used the liberty of visiting at Thrushcross Grange cautiously at first. He seemed estimating how far its owner would bear his intrusion. Catherine also deemed it judicious to moderate her expressions of pleasure in receiving him, and he gradually established his right to be expected. He retained a great deal of the reserve for which his boyhood was remarkable, and that served to repress all startling demonstrations of feeling. My master's uneasiness experienced a lull, and further circumstances diverted it into another channel for a space. His new source of trouble sprang from the not anticipated misfortune of Isabella Linton, evincing a sudden and irresistible attraction towards the tolerated guest. So Edgar Linton, the husband of Kathy, his younger sister Isabella is interested in Heathcliff. She was at the time a charming young lady of 18, infantile in manners, though possessed of keen wit, keen feelings, and a keen temper, too, if irritated. Her brother, who loved her tenderly, was appalled at this fantastic preference. Leaving aside the degradation of an alliance with a nameless man, and the possible fact that his property in default of heirs male might pass into such a one's power, he had sense to comprehend Heathcliff's disposition, to know that, though his exterior was altered, his mind was unchangeable and unchanged. Okay. Oh, it's also, for background, good to note that Heathcliff, when he returned, he came back with a lot of money. And we don't know how he got this money. It seems like it might not have been of the most, moral means, but it's not clear. Let's see. We have a footnote. For an account of Emily Bronte's understanding of the complex law of entail, which is a property and inheritance, see C.P. Sanger's The Structure of Wuthering Heights. Okay. Moving on. And he dreaded that mind. It revolted him. He shrank forebodingly from the idea of committing Isabella to its keeping. He would have recoiled still more had he been aware that her attachment rose unsolicited and was bestowed where it awakened no reciprocation of sentiment. For the minute he discovered its existence, he laid the blame on Heathcliff's deliberate designing. We had all remarked, during some time, that Miss Linton fretted and pined over something. She grew cross and wearisome, snapping at and teasing Catherine continually, at the imminent risk of exhausting her limited patience. We excused her to a certain extent on the plea of ill health. She was dwindling and fading before our eyes. But one day, when she had been peculiarly wayward, rejecting her breakfast, complaining that the servants did not do what she told them, that the mistress would not allow her to be nothing in the house, and Edgar neglected her, that she had caught a cold with the doors being left open, and we let the parlor fire go out on purpose to vex her. With 100 yet more frivolous accusations, Mrs. Linton peremptorily insisted that she should get to bed, and having scolded her heartily, threatened to send for the doctor. Mention of Kenneth, meaning the doctor, caused her to exclaim instantly that her health was perfect, and it was only Catherine's harshness which made her unhappy. "How can you say that I am harsh, you naughty fondling?" cried the mistress, amazed at the unreasonable assertion. "You are surely losing your reason. When have I been harsh? Tell me." "Yesterday," sobbed Isabella. "And now?" "Yesterday?" said her sister-in-law. "On what occasion?" "In our walk along the moor, you told me to ramble where I pleased, where you sauntered on with Mr. Heathcliff." "And that's your notion of harshness?" said Catherine, laughing. "It was no hint that your company was superfluous. We didn't care whether you kept with us or not. I merely thought Heathcliff's talk would have nothing entertaining for your ears." "Oh, no," wept the young lady. "You wished me away because you knew that I liked to be there." "Is she sane?" asked Mrs. Linton, appealing to me. "I'll repeat our conversation word for word, Isabella, and you point out any charm it could have had for you." "I don't mind the conversation," she answered. "I wanted to be with—" "Well," said Catherine, perceiving her hesitate to complete the sentence. "With him, and I won't always be sent off," she continued, kindling up. "You are a dog in the manger, Cathy, and desire no one to be loved but yourself." "You are an impertinent little monkey," exclaimed Mrs. Linton in surprise. "But I'll not believe this idiocy. It is impossible that you can covet the admiration of Heathcliff, that you can consider him an agreeable person. I hope I have misunderstood you, Isabella." "No, you have not," said the infatuated girl. "I love him more than you ever loved Edgar," which might be true. "And he might love me if you would let him." "I wouldn't be you for a kingdom, then," Catherine declared emphatically, and she seemed to speak sincerely. "Nellie, help me to convince her of her madness. Tell her what Heathcliff is, an unreclaimed creature without refinement, without cultivation, an arid wilderness of firs and whinstone. I'd soon as put that little canary into the park on a winter's day as recommend you to bestow your heart on him. It's deplorable ignorance of his character, child, and nothing else, which makes that dream enter your head. Pray don't imagine that he conceals depths of benevolence and affection beneath a stern exterior. He's not a rough diamond, a pearl-containing oyster of a rustic. He's a fierce, pitiless, wolfish man. I never say to him, 'Let this or that enemy alone,' because it would be ungenerous or cruel to harm them. I say, 'Let them alone because I should hate them to be wronged.' And he'd crush you like a sparrow's egg, Isabella, if he found you a troublesome charge. I know he couldn't love a Linton, and yet he'd be quite capable of marrying your fortune and expectations. Avarice is growing with him a besetting sin. There's my picture, and I'm his friend. So much so that he had thought seriously to catch you. I should, perhaps, have held my tongue and let you fall into his trap." Miss Linton regarded her sister-in-law with indignation. For shame, she repeated angrily. "You are worse than 20 foes, you poisonous friend." "Ah, you won't believe me, then?" said Catherine. "You think I speak from wicked selfishness?" "I am certain you do," retorted Isabella, "and I shudder at you." "Good," cried the other. "Try for yourself, if that be your spirit. I have done, and yield the argument to your saucy insolence." "And I must suffer for her egotism," she sobbed as Mrs. Linton left the room. All is against me. She has blighted my single consolation. But she uttered falsehoods, didn't she? Mr. Heathcliff is not a fiend. He has an honorable soul, and a true one, or how could he remember her?" Banish him from your thoughts, miss, I said. He's a bird of bad omen, no mate for you. Mrs. Linton spoke strongly, and yet I can't contradict her. She is better acquainted with his heart than I, or anyone besides, and she never would represent him as worse than he is. Honest people don't hide their deeds. How has he been living? How has he got rich? Why is he staying at Wuthering Heights, the house of a man whom he abhors? They say Mr. Earnshaw is worse and worse since he came. They sit up all night together continually. And Hindley, which is the older brother, and Hindley has been borrowing money on his land, and does nothing but play and drink. I heard only a week ago it was Joseph who told me. I met him at Gimmerton. Nellie, he said, we haze a crant. Okay, this is where I get into reading the vernacular. It's written like how you're supposed to say it. So I like register as I speak what is being said. So I apologize if this offends anybody from the UK. We hae a crowner's questina, which means... Uh-oh. There we go. We shall have a coroner's inquest soon, is what that means. There we go. At our folks, one on 'em's a'most getting his finger cut off with howding t'other fru sticking his own like a calf. I don't know what that means. Preventing the other from killing himself. Oh, damn. Okay. That's Maester, you know. It's a sew up going to de grand sizes. Another footnote. So set on going to the grand assizes, meaning heaven. Oh. He's no one feared to bench a judges, nor their Paul, nor Peter, nor John, nor Matthew, nor no one on 'em, not he. He fair likes, he langs to set his brazen face agin 'em, and ye bonny lad Heathcliff, ye mind he's a rare un, he can girn a laugh as weel's anybody at a right's devil's jest. A gurn is a snarl, apparently. Does he never say nowt of his fine living among us, when he goes to the Grange? 'Tis to way on to up at sundown, dice, brandy, close shutters, and he can light till next day at noon. Then to fool gangs banning and raving to his charmer, making decent folks dig their fingers their lugs, for very shame. Oh, shame, I'm guessing. And the knave, why he can't his brass, and ate and sleep, and off to his neighbours to gossip with wife. Of course, he tells Dame Catherine's how her father's gold runs into his pocket, and her father's son gallops down to Broad Road, while he flees afore to open to Pikes. Gates. Now, Miss Linton. Okay, so that was Nellie doing an impression of Joseph. That was there you go. That's what happens when I'm reading this vernacular, which is like spelled like how they're trying to have it pronounced. Normally I don't do accents, but this kind of forces you to. Now, Miss Linton, Joseph is an old rascal, but no liar, and if his account of Heathcliff's conduct be true, you would never think of desiring such a husband, would you? You are leagued with the rest, Ellen, she replied. I'll not listen to your slanders. What malevolence you must have to wish to convince me that there is no happiness in the world. Whether she would have got over this fancy if left to herself, or perceived in nursing it perpetually, I cannot say. She had little time to reflect. The day after, there was a justice meeting at the next town. My master was obliged to attend, and Mr. Heathcliff, aware of his absence, called rather earlier than usual. Really? Really tricky accent. I know, I'm like, normally I'm not going to, like, willingly humiliate myself with poor accents, but just reading the text. Okay. Catherine and Isabella were sitting in the library on hostile terms, but silent. The latter alarmed at her recent indiscretion and the disclosure she had made of her secret feelings in a transient fit of passion. The former, on a mature consideration, really offended with her companion. And, if she laughed again at her pertness, inclined to make it no laughing matter to her. She did laugh as she saw Heathcliff pass the window. I was sweeping on the hearth, and I noticed a mischievous smile on her lips. Isabella, absorbed in her meditations, or a book, remained till the door opened, and it was too late to attempt an escape, which she would gladly have done had it been practicable. "Come in, that's right," exclaimed the mistress, gaily, pulling a chair to the fire. "Here are two people sadly in need of a third to thaw the ice between them, and you are the very one we should both of us choose. Heathcliff, I'm proud to show you at last somebody that dotes on you more than myself. I expect you to feel flattered. Nay, it's not Nellie, don't look at her. My poor little sister-in-law's breaking her heart by mere contemplation of your physical and moral beauty." Just humiliating Isabella in front of Heathcliff of like, "Oh, she has a crush on you." And also wanting to flex as well that Heathcliff loves Cathy and not Isabella. "It lies in your own power to be Edgar's brother. No, Isabella, you shan't run off," she continued, arresting with feigned playfulness the confounded girl, who had risen indignantly. "We were quarreling like cats about you, Heathcliff, and I was fairly beaten in protestations of devotion and admiration. And moreover, I was informed that if I would but have the manners to stand aside, my rival, as she will have herself to be, would shoot a shaft into your soul that would fix you forever, and send my image into eternal oblivion." "Catherine," said Isabella, calling up her dignity, and disdaining to struggle from the tight grasp that held her, "I thank you to adhere to the truth, and not to slander me, even in joke. Mr. Heathcliff, be kind enough to bid this friend of yours release me. She forgets that you and I are not intimate acquaintances, and what amuses her is painful to me beyond expression." As the guest answered nothing, but took his seat, he just doesn't care, and looked thoroughly indifferent what sentiments she cherished concerning him, she turned and whispered an earnest appeal for liberty to her tormentor. "By no means," cried Mrs. Linton in answer. "I won't be named a dog in the manger again. You shall stay. Now then." She's like, "You wanted to be around him. I'm going to force you to be around him." Like, imposing domination without consent. "Heathcliff, why don't you evince satisfaction at my pleasant news? Isabella swears that the love Edgar has for me is nothing to that she entertains for you." Cathy is so rude. Catherine has in fact misrepresented what Isabella said, for Isabella claimed that she loved Heathcliff more than Catherine loves Edgar. She's like intentionally trying to twist her words. "I'm sure she made some speech of the kind, did she not, Ellen? She has fasted ever since the day before yesterday's walk, from sorrow and rage that I dispatched her out of your society, under the idea of its being unacceptable." "I think you belie her," said Heathcliff, twisting his chair to face them. "She wishes to be out of my society now, at any rate." And he stared hard at the object of discourse, as one might do at a strange, repulsive animal, a centipede from the Indies, for instance, which curiosity leads one to examine in spite of the aversion it raises. The poor thing couldn't bear that. She grew white and red in rapid succession, and while tears beaded her lashes, bent the strength of her small fingers to loosen the firm clutch of Catherine, and perceiving that, as fast as she raised one finger off her arm, another closed down, and she could not remove the whole together, she began to make use of her nails, and their sharpness presently ornamented the detainers with crescents of red. So she's clawing at Cathy's arm. "There's a tigress!" exclaimed Mrs. Linton, setting her free, and shaking her hand with pain. "Begone, for God's sake, and hide your vixen face. How foolish to reveal those talons to him! Can't you fancy the conclusions he'll draw? Look, Heathcliff, they are instruments that will do execution. You must beware your eyes." Beware of your eyes. I'd wrench them off her fingers if they ever menaced me, he answered brutally, when the door had closed after her. But what did you mean by teasing the creature in that manner, Kathy? You were not speaking the truth, were you? I assure you I was, she returned. She has been pining for your sake several weeks, and raving about you this morning, and pouring forth a deluge of abuse, because I represented your failings in a plain light for the purpose of mitigating her adoration. But don't notice it further. I wish to punish her sauciness, that's all. I like her too well, my dear Heathcliff, to let you absolutely seize and devour her up. And I like her too ill to attempt it, said he, except in a very ghoulish fashion. You'd hear of odd things if I lived alone with that mawkish, waxen face. The most ordinary would be painting on its white the colors of the rainbow, and turning the blue eyes black every day or two. They detestably resemble Linton's. Delectably, observed Catherine. They are dove's eyes, angels. She is her brother's heir, is she not? He asked after a brief silence. I should be sorry to think so, returned his companion. Half a dozen nephews shall erase her title, please heaven. Abstract your mind from the subject at present. You are too prone to covet your neighbor's goods. Remember, this neighbor's goods are mine. If they were mine, they would be none the less that, said Heathcliff. But though Isabella Linton may be silly, she is scarcely mad, and, in short, we'll dismiss the matter as you advise. From their tongues they did dismiss it, and Catherine probably from her thoughts. The other, I felt certain, recalled it often in the course of the evening. I saw him smile to himself, grin rather, and lapse into ominous musing whenever Mrs. Linton had occasion to be absent from the apartment. So he's, interested that Isabella likes him. I determined to watch his movements. My heart invariably cleaved to the master's in preference to Catherine's side. With reason, I imagined, for he was kind and trustful and honorable, and she could not be called the opposite, yet she seemed to allow herself such wide latitude that I had little faith in her principles, and still less sympathy for her feelings. I wanted something to happen which might have the effect of freeing both Wuthering Heights and the Grange of Mr. Heathcliff, quietly, leaving us as we had been prior to his advent. His visits were a continual nightmare to me, and I suspected to my master also. His abode at the Heights was an oppression past explaining. Yeah, and Nellie doesn't have a reason to not like him. She just is being racist and classist as well. I felt, even though he has risen in class, she doesn't like that he was able to rise in class. I felt that God had forsaken the stray sheep there to its own wicked wanderings, and an evil beast prowled between it and the fold, waiting his time to spring and destroy. Okay. Chapter 11. Sometimes, while meditating on these things in solitude, I've got up in a sudden terror and put on my bonnet to go see how all was at the farm. I persuaded my conscience that it was a duty to warn him how people talked regarding his ways. And then I've recollected his confirmed bad habits, and hopeless of benefiting him, have flinched from re-entering the dismal house, doubting if I could bear to be taken at my word. At one time I passed the old gate, going out of my way on a journey to Gimmerton. It was about the period that my narrative has reached, a bright, frosty afternoon, the ground bare, the road hard and dry. I came to a stone where the highway branches off onto the moor at your left hand, a rough sand pillar with the letters W.H., meaning Wuthering Heights, cut on its north side, on the east, G, meaning Gimmerton, and on the southwest, T.G., which means Thrushcross Grange, not Thrustcross. It serves as a guidepost to the Grange and Heights and the village. The sun shone yellow on its gray head, reminding me of summer, and I cannot say why, but all at once a gush of child sensations flowed into my heart. Hindley and I held it a favorite spot 20 years before. I gazed long at the weather-worn block, and stooping down, perceived a hole near the bottom, still full of snail shells and pebbles, which we were fond of storing there with more perishable things. and as fresh as reality. It appeared that I beheld my early playmate seated on the withered turf, his dark, square head bent forward, and his little hand scooping out the earth with a piece of slate. "Poor Hindley," I exclaimed involuntarily. I started, which she likes Hindley, and she doesn't have a reason to, because I guess they played when they were younger, but he was always rude, especially to Heathcliff, but I guess she doesn't care about Heathcliff, so there's that. I started. My bodily eye was cheated into a momentary belief that the child lifted its face and stared straight into mine. It vanished in a twinkling, but immediately I felt an irresistible yearning to be at the Heights. Superstition urged me to comply with this impulse. Supposing he should be dead, I thought, or should die soon. Supposing it were a sign of death. The nearer I got to the house, the more agitated I grew, and on catching sight of it, I trembled every limb. The apparition had outstripped me. It stood looking through the gate. That was my first idea on observing an elf-locked, brown-eyed boy setting his ruddy countenance against the bars. Further reflection suggested this must be Hareton, my Hareton, not altered greatly since I left him 10 months since. Hareton is the son of Hindley, so he's Catherine's nephew. And he's kind of like left to his own devices. Hindley tried to drop him off a banister earlier. Heathcliff saved him. And Nellie was like the main caretaker of Hareton when he was younger. The nearer I got to the... Oh, wait. I already read that. "God bless thee, darling," I cried, forgetting instantaneously my foolish fears. "Hareton, it's Nellie! Nellie, thy nurse!" He retreated out of an arm's length and picked up a large flint. "I am come to see thy father, Hareton," I added, guessing from the action that Nellie, if she lived in his memory at all, was not recognized as one with me. He raised his missile to hurl it. I commenced a soothing speech, but could not stay his hand. The stone struck my bonnet, and then he's just throwing rocks at her. And then ensued from the stammering lips of the little fellow a string of curses which, whether he comprehended them or not, were delivered with practiced emphasis and distorted his baby features into a shocking expression of malignity. You may be certain this grieved more than angered me. Fit to cry, I took an orange from my pocket and offered it to propitiate him. He hesitated, and then snatched it from my hold, as if he fancied I only intended to tempt and disappoint him, because he's been abused, that's why. I showed another, keeping it out of his reach. "Who has taught you those fine words, my bairn?" I inquired. "The curate?" Bairn, I'm guessing, is like bairn. Child. Yes, child. All right. "Damn the curate and thee! Give me that!" he replied. "Tell us where you got your lessons, and you shall have it," said I. "Who's your master?" "Devil Daddy," was his answer. "And what do you learn from Daddy?" I continued. He jumped at the fruit. I raised it higher. "What does he teach you?" "Naught," said he, "but to keep out of his gate. Daddy cannot bide me, because I swear at him." "Ah, and the devil teaches you to swear at Daddy?" I observed. "Aye. Nay," he drawled. "Who then?" "Heathcliff." I asked if he liked Mr. Heathcliff. "Aye," he answered again. Desiring to have his reasons for liking him, I could only gather the sentences. "I know't. He pays Dad..." Oh, this is still him talking. That wasn't very clear. "I know't. He pays Dad back when what he gives to me. He curses Daddy for cursing me. He says I mun do as I will." "And the curate does not teach you to read and write, then?" I pursued. "No, I was told the curate should have his teeth dashed down his throat, because I guess he has a stutter. If he stepped over the threshold, Heathcliff had promised that." I put the orange in his hand and bade him tell his father that a woman called Nellie Dean was waiting to speak with him by the garden gate. He went up the walk and entered the house, but instead of Hindley, Heathcliff appeared on the door-stones, and I turned directly and ran down the road as hard as ever I could race, making no halt till I gained the guide-post and feeling as scared as if I had raised a goblin. This is not much connected with Miss Isabella's affair, except that it urged me to resolve further on mounting vigilant guard, and doing my utmost to check the spread of such bad influence at the Grange, even though I should wake a domestic storm by thwarting Mrs. Linton's pleasure. The next time Heathcliff came, my young lady chanced to be feeding some pigeons in the court. She had never spoken a word to her sister-in-law for 3 days, but she had likewise dropped her fretful complaining, and we found it a great comfort. Heathcliff had not the habit of bestowing a single unnecessary civility on Miss Linton, I knew. Now, as soon as he beheld her, his first precaution was to take a sweeping survey of the house front. I was standing by the kitchen window, but I drew out of sight. He then stepped across the pavement to her and said something. She seemed embarrassed and desirous of getting away. To prevent it, he laid his hand on her arm. She averted her face. He apparently put some question which she had no mind to answer. There was another rapid glance at the house, and supposing himself unseen, the scoundrel had the impudence, to embrace her. "Judas! Traitor!" I ejaculated, which is an old word for, exclaiming, is its original meaning. "You are a hypocrite too, are you? A deliberate deceiver." "Who is Nellie?" said Catherine's voice at my elbow. I had been over-intent on watching the pair outside to mark her entrance. She just doesn't like Heathcliff for, not any good reason. So, we can't trust Nellie as a narrator. "Your worthless friend," I answered warmly. "The sneaking rascal yonder. He has caught a glimpse of us. He is coming in. I wonder, will he have the art to find a plausible excuse for making love to Miss when he told you he hated her?" Making love meaning he was hugging her and probably kissing her. Mrs. Linton saw Isabella tear herself free and run into the garden, and a minute after, Heathcliff opened the door. I couldn't withhold giving some loose to my indignation, but Catherine angrily insisted on silence, and threatened to order me out of the kitchen if I dared to be so presumptuous as to put in my insolent tongue. "To hear you, people might think you were the mistress," she cried. "You want setting down in your right place. Heathcliff, what are you about, raising this stir?" So Cathy, intent on putting people in their place, meaning emphasizing their class and humiliating them. "I said you must let Isabella alone. I beg you will, unless you are tired of being received here, and wish Linton to draw the bolts against you." "God forbid that he should try," answered the black villain. I detested him just then. So again, calling him black, meaning he has a darker complexion. We aren't sure what race he is. But he's constantly being perceived as a villain and cruel, and often that is associated with depictions of his complexion as well. Which is racist, by the way. Just to be clear. "God keep him meek and patient. Every day I grow madder after sending him to heaven." "Hush," said Catherine, shutting the inner door. "Don't vex me. Why have you disregarded my request?" "Hi, Buck." Cat's making a stir. "Hi, buddy." They just ate dinner. They usually come and do a walk about the room. Okay, bye. Where was I? "Did she come across you on purpose?" "What is it to you?" he growled. "I have a right to kiss her, if she chooses, and you have no right to object. I'm not your husband. You needn't be jealous of me." Which he is absolutely correct. Oh no. I'll see if I can turn this page. There we go. "I'm not jealous of you," replied the mistress. "I'm jealous for you. Clear your face. You shan't scowl at me. If you like Isabella, you shall marry her. But do you like her? Tell the truth, Heathcliff. There, you won't answer? I'm certain you don't. And would Mr. Linton approve of his sister marrying that man? I inquired. Mr. Linton should approve, returned the lady decisively. He might spare himself the trouble, said Heathcliff. I could do as well without his approbation. And as to you, Catherine, I have a mind to speak a few words now, while we are at it. I want you to be aware that I know you have treated me infernally. Infernally. Do you hear? And so he's viewed also as like speaking out of turn because he stands up for himself. And that's viewed as like, oh, he's being cruel and violent when he has self-respect. And if you flatter yourself that I don't perceive it, you are a fool. And if you think I can be consoled by sweet words, you are an idiot. And if you fancy I'll suffer unrevenged, I'll convince you of the contrary in a very little while. Meantime, thank you for telling me your sister-in-law's secret. I swear I'll make the most of it, and stand you aside. What new phase of his character is this? Exclaimed Mrs. Linton in amazement. I've treated you infernally, and you'll take revenge? How will you take it, ungrateful brute? How have I treated you infernally? I seek no revenge on you, replied Heathcliff, less vehemently. Vehemently? That's how you say it. That's not the plan. The tyrant grinds down his slaves, and they don't turn against him. They crush those beneath them. You are welcome to torture me to death for your amusement, only allow me to amuse myself in a little in the same style, and refrain from insult as much as you are able. Having leveled my palace, don't erect a hovel and complacently admire your own charity in giving me that for a home. If I imagined you really wished to marry Isabella, I'd cut my throat. Oh, the evil is that I am not jealous, is it? Cried Catherine. Well, I won't repeat my offer of a wife. It is as bad as offering Satan a lost soul. Your bliss lies, like his, in inflicting misery. You prove it. Edgar is restored from the ill temper he gave way to at your coming. I begin to be secure and tranquil, and you, restless to know us at peace, appear resolved on exciting a quarrel. Quarrel with Edgar, if you please, Heathcliff, and deceive his sister. You'll hit on exactly the most efficient method of revenging yourself on me. The conversation ceased. Mrs. Linton sat down by the fire, flushed and gloomy. The spirit which served her was growing intractable. She could neither lay nor control it. He stood on the hearth with folded arms, brooding on his evil thoughts, and in this position I left them to seek the master, who was wondering what kept Catherine below so long. Ellen, said he when I entered, have you seen your mistress? Yes, she's in the kitchen, sir, I answered. She's sadly put out by Mr. Heathcliff's behavior, and indeed, I do think it's time to arrange his visits on another footing. There's harm in being too soft, and now it's come to this. And I related the scene in the court, and as near as I dared, the whole subsequent dispute. I fancied it could not be very prejudicial to Mrs. Linton, unless she made it so afterwards, by assuming the defensive for her guest. Edgar Linton had difficulty in hearing me to the close. His first words revealed that he did not clear his wife of blame. This is insufferable, he exclaimed. It is disgraceful that she should own him for a friend, and force his company on me. Call me 2 men out of the hall, Ellen. Catherine shall linger no longer to argue with the low ruffian. I've humoured her enough. He descended, and bidding the servants wait in the passage, went, followed by me, to the kitchen. Its occupants had recommenced their angry discussion. Mrs. Linton, at least, was scolding with renewed vigor. Heathcliff had moved to the window and hung his head, somewhat cowed by her violent rating, apparently. He saw the master first, and made a hasty motion that she should be silent, which she obeyed abruptly, on discovering the reason of his intimation. How is this? Said Linton, addressing her. What notion of propriety must you have to remain here, after the language which has been held to you by that blackguard? I suppose, because, again, the racialized language. I suppose because it is his ordinary talk. You think nothing of it. You are habituated to his baseness, and perhaps imagine I can get used to it too. Have you been listening at the door, Edgar? Asked the mistress, in a tone particularly calculated to provoke her husband, implying both carelessness and contempt of his irritation. Heathcliff, who had raised his eyes at the former speech, gave a sneering laugh at the latter, on purpose, it seemed, to draw Mr. Linton's attention to him. He succeeded, but Edgar did not mean to entertain him with any high flights of passion. I have been so far forbearing with you, sir, he said quietly. Not that I was ignorant of your miserable, degraded character, but I felt you were only partly responsible for that. And Catherine, wishing to keep up your acquaintance, I acquiesced, foolishly. Your presence is a moral poison that would contaminate the most virtuous. For that cause, and to prevent worse consequences, I shall deny you hereafter admission into this house, and give notice now that I require your instant departure. 3 minutes' delay will render it involuntary and ignominious. Heathcliff measured the height and breadth of the speaker with an eye full of derision. Cathy, this lamb of yours threatens like a bull, he said. It is in danger of splitting its skull against my knuckles. By God, Mr. Linton, I'm mortally sorry that you are not worth knocking down. He's like, you're not even worth punching. My master glanced towards the passage and signed me to fetch the men. He had no intention of hazarding a personal encounter. Yeah, he does not want to fight Heathcliff. I obeyed the hint, but Mrs. Linton, suspecting something, followed, and when I attempted to call them, she pulled me back, slammed the door to, and locked it. Fair means, she said in answer to her husband's look of angry surprise. If you have not the courage to attack him, make an apology, or allow yourself to be beaten. I mean, that's fair. It will correct you of feigning more valor than you possess. No, I'll swallow the key before you shall get it. I'm delightfully rewarded for my kindness to each. After constant indulgence of one's weak nature and the other's bad one, I earn for thanks 2 samples of blind ingratitude, stupid to absurdity. Edgar, I was defending you and yours. I wish Heathcliff may flog you sick for daring to think an evil thought of me. It did not need the medium of a flogging to produce the effect on the master. He tried to wrest the key from Catherine's grasp, and for safety she flung it into the hottest part of the fire, whereupon Mr. Edgar was taken with a nervous trembling, and his countenance grew deadly pale. For his life he could not avert that excess of emotion. Mingled anguish and humiliation overcame him completely. He leant on the back of a chair and covered his face. Oh, heavens! In old days this would win you knighthood, exclaimed Mrs. Linton. We are vanquished! We are vanquished! Heathcliff would as soon as lift a finger at you as the king would march his army against a colony of mice. Cheer up! You shan't be hurt. Your type is not a lamb. It is a sucking leveret. Okay, we'll find out what that means. I mean, she's calling out his cowardice. A leveret is a young hare. Okay. And apparently Emily Bronte, the author, uses this word in a poem that she wrote called Well, Some May Hate and Some May Scorn. This is the poem. Do I despise the timid deer because his limbs are fleet with fear? Or would I mock the wolf's death howl because his form is gaunt and foul? Or hear with joy the leveret's cry because it cannot bravely die? Okay. Oh, so this is Heathcliff now. I wish you the joy of the milk-blooded coward, Cathy, said her friend. I compliment you on your taste, and that is the slavering, shivering thing you preferred to me? He is, valid in saying this. I would not strike him with my fist, but I'd kick him with my foot and experience considerable satisfaction. Is he weeping, or is he going to faint for fear? The fellow approached and gave the chair on which Linton rested a push. He'd better have kept his distance. My master quickly sprang erect and struck him full on the throat, a blow that would have leveled a slider man. Jeez, Edgar does not fight fair either. It took his breath for a minute, and while he choked, Mr. Linton walked out by the back door into the yard, and from thence to the front entrance. It's like, so Heathcliff constantly is being viewed as violent, but most of the time it's like violence that is happening against him. "There! You've done with coming here," cried Catherine. "Get away now. He'll return with a brace of pistols and a half a dozen assistants. If he did overhear us, of course, he'd never forgive you. You've played me an ill turn, Heathcliff. But go, make haste. I'd rather see Edgar at bay than you." "Do you suppose I'm going with that blow burning in my gullet?" he thundered. "By hell, no! I'll crush his ribs in a like rotten hazelnut before I cross the threshold." Oh, getting a spam call. Anyway. "If I don't floor him now, I shall murder him sometime. So as you value his existence, let me get at him." "He is not coming." "Oh, he is not coming," I interposed, framing a bit of a lie. "There's the coachman and the 2 gardeners. You'll surely not wait to be thrust into the road by them. Each has a bludgeon, and master will, very likely, be watching from the parlor windows to see that they fulfill his orders." The gardeners and coachman were there, but Linton was with them. They had already entered the court. Heathcliff, on second thoughts, resolved to avoid a struggle against 3 underlings. He seized the poker, smashed the lock from the inner door, and made his escape as they tramped in. I'm going to see how much longer this chapter is. Okay. Mrs. Linton, who was very much excited, bid me accompany her upstairs. She did not know my share in contributing to the disturbance, and I was anxious to keep her in ignorance. "I'm nearly distracted, Nellie," she exclaimed, throwing herself on the sofa. "1,000 smith's hammers are beating in my head. Tell Isabella to shun me. This uproar is owing to her, and should she or anyone else aggravate my anger at present, I shall get wild. And Nellie, say to Edgar, if you see him again tonight, that I'm in danger of being seriously ill. I wish it may prove true. He has startled and distressed me shockingly. I want to frighten him. Besides, he might come and begin a string of abuse or complainings. I'm certain I should recriminate, and God knows where we should end. Will you do so, my good Nellie? You are aware that I am no way blamable in this matter." "Sure, Kathy." "What possessed him to turn listener? Heathcliff's talk was outrageous after you left us, but I could soon have diverted him from Isabella, and the rest meant nothing. Now all is dashed wrong by the fool's craving to hear evil of self that haunts some people like a demon. Had Edgar never gathered our conversation, he would never have been the worse for it. Really, when he opened on me in that unreasonable tone of displeasure, after I had scolded Heathcliff till I was hoarse for him, I did not care hardly what they did to each other, especially as I felt that, however the scene closed, we should all be driven asunder for nobody knows how long. Well, if I cannot keep Heathcliff for my friend, if Edgar will be mean and jealous, I'll try to break their hearts for breaking my own." You've already done that to them, Kathy. Okay? "That will be a prompt way of finishing all, when I am pushed to extremity. But it's a deed to be reserved for a forlorn hope. I did not take Linton by surprise with it. To this point he has been discreet in dreading to provoke me. You must represent the peril of quitting that policy, and remind him of my passionate temper, verging when kindled on frenzy. I wish you could dismiss that apathy out of your countenance, and look rather more anxious about me." The stolidity with which I received these instructions was, no doubt, rather exasperating. Yeah. For they were delivered in perfect sincerity. But I believed a person who could plan the turning of her fits of passion to account beforehand might, by exerting her will, manage to control herself tolerably, even while under their influence. I did not wish to frighten her husband, as she said, and multiply his annoyances for the purposes of serving her selfishness. Therefore I said nothing when I met the master coming towards the parlor, but I took the liberty of turning back to listen whether they would resume their quarrel together. He began to speak first. "Remain where you are, Catherine," he said, without any anger in his voice, but with much sorrowful despondency. "I shall not stay. I'm neither come to wrangle nor be reconciled, but I wish just to learn whether, after this evening's events, you intend to continue your intimacy with," meaning with Heathcliff. "Oh, for mercy's sake," interrupted the mistress, stamping her foot. "For mercy's sake, let us hear no more of it now. Your cold blood cannot be worked into a fever. Your veins are full of ice water, but mine are boiling, and the sight of such chillness makes them dance." "To get rid of me, answer my question," persevered Mr. Linton. "You must answer it, and that violence does not alarm me. I have found that you can be as stoical as anyone when you please. Will you give up Heathcliff hereafter, or will you give up me? It is impossible for you to be my friend and his at the same time, and I absolutely require to know which you choose." "I require to be let alone!" exclaimed Catherine furiously. "I demand it! Don't you see I can scarcely stand? Edgar, you leave me!" A lot of drama happening. She rung the bell till it broke with a twang. I entered leisurely. Nellie is such a troll. It was enough to try the temper of a saint, such senseless, wicked rages. There she lay dashing her head against the arm of the sofa and grinding her teeth so that you might fancy she would crash them to splinters. Mr. Linton stood looking at her in sudden compunction and fear. He told me to fetch some water. She had no breath for speaking. I brought a glass full, and as she would not drink, I sprinkled it on her face. In a few seconds she stretched herself out stiff and turned up her eyes, while her cheeks at once, blanched and livid, assumed the aspect of death. Linton looked terrified. "There is nothing in the world the matter," I whispered. I did not want him to yield, though I could not help being afraid in my heart. "She has blood on her lips," he said, shuddering. "Never mind," I answered tartly, and I told him how she had resolved, previous to his coming on exhibiting a fit of frenzy. I incautiously gave the account aloud, and she heard me, for she started up, her hair flying over her shoulders, her eyes flashing, the muscles of her neck and arms standing out preternaturally. I made up my mind, for broken bones at least, but she only glared about her, for an instant, and then rushed from the room. The master directed me to follow. I did, to her chamber door. She hindered me from going farther by securing it against me. As she never offered to descend to breakfast next morning, I went to ask whether she would have some carried up. "No," she replied peremptorily. The same question was repeated at dinner and tea, and again on the morrow after, and received the same answer. Mr. Linton, on his part, spent his time in the library and did not inquire concerning his wife's occupations. Isabella said, nope. Isabella and he had had an hour's interview, during which he tried to elicit from her some sentiment of proper horror for Heathcliff's advances. But he could make nothing of her evasive replies, and was obliged to close the examination unsatisfactorily, adding, however, a solemn warning that if she were so insane as to encourage that worthless suitor, it would dissolve all bonds of relationship between herself and him. Okay. That's chapter 11. We got through 10. We were able to get through 11 as well. I wasn't expecting to, but there we go. All right. I'm gonna be done for the night, but thank you all for being here. It was really nice chatting with you and being with you. Is there anyone else on right now that we could do a raid for, to, at, on? I don't know what the terminology is. Anyone with, like, progressive politics? Let's see. Opening the browser. Filter by category, by tag. Okay. Should we raid? I don't know who this is. This person, perhaps? Exotantan? Or gaming, if y'all are interested in this. Thank you for being here. Be polite. I hope you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your evening. And I'll see you soon. Just keep your notifications on for when I'm streaming. I'm usually on around 2 to 6:30 p.m. Mountain Time where I'm located. Okay, about to start the raid. Okay, bye.